Good evening. The July 11th of the meeting of the Evanston City Council will come to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Nusma?
Here.
Councilmember Burns?
Here.
Councilmember Sefferden? I think he might be online. Councilmember Ravel?
Here.
Councilmember Reed?
Here.
Councilmember Harkaris?
Here.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Braithwaite?
Here.
Councilmember Wynn?
Here.
With 8 members present, we have a quorum and we're prepared to do our work. The first item on our agenda is my public announcements and proclamations, of which I have to tell you there will be several. First, tomorrow evening on the 4th floor of this building at 7 o'clock in the Parasol Room, we'll have a town hall meeting to discuss the status and next steps and broader circumstances around the search for a city manager. So come one, come all. The day after, also at 7 o'clock, but virtually, Council Member Nusma will be holding a town hall meeting to discuss the redistricting process for the ward map, which is going to have to begin shortly. Next, I want to just begin the next item with a really warm thank you. We're saying some goodbyes tonight, and we're losing a lot of institutional knowledge and institutional memory tonight. First, I want to ask the organization, right? So the elected officials up here and the staff throughout this building and throughout this organization and the whole community to join me in saying an enormous thank you to Councilmember Peter Braithwaite. That wasn't designed to be an applause line, so there may be a lot more clapping that comes in a moment. Councilmember Braithwaite is chosen to leave the council at this time after putting in a tremendous amount of time and giving a tremendous amount to this community. And I just personally want to flag a few things. First of all, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, there's a lot of new folks here on this council. I'm new myself at municipal government, and experience has been really precious. And your experience in particular, your institutional knowledge, your memory of how so many things have worked over the years has been really important, I suspect, for all of us, but I know for me personally. And for me personally, the time that you've been willing to give to walk me through things and share your view on things and educate me has been enormously valuable. I really, really appreciate it. The other thing that really has been reverberating in my mind ever since you mentioned to me that you're that you're going to be leaving the council is the completely constant clarity that you bring to the question of what your priorities are. Right. When I first spoke with you about serving on city council, you talked about your commitment to the Black community in Evanston and your commitment to growing businesses in Evanston. And it doesn't matter what hurricane is going on around us, you remain clear in your mind about what your priorities are. And I just find that to be such a useful example. I find that to be something that I think about a lot and trying to do a better job myself. There's always something going on. There's always a thing that might take our eye off the ball. There's always something that's ready to grab our attention away. And if we're not clear in ourselves about why we're here, that can steer us off course all the time. But you never let that happen. And I think not only do I personally find that to be a really inspiring example, but I think our community has really benefited from that tremendously. I know that personally, I'm going to miss all that you bring to this council. I think there's a lot of people up here and out there and beyond the walls of this building who feel the same way. We also know how you feel about this town. We know you're not going anywhere. We know that the work that you're doing on your new very exciting day job is one that's informed by what you've brought to this organization, and we know that you're interested in staying involved in the organization. And I know you're not going to be far, and I hope you don't mind if I continue to reach out when I need to get educated. But I just want to say thank you so much for all you've done, and it really, really means a lot to all of us. So now, if folks want to applaud, I want to present Councilmember Braithwaite as a very small token of our appreciation, a plaque to appreciate and thank him for his service. Star of the show.
Wait, hold on, sorry, of course.
Two, three, four.
All right.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
I'll be brief. This has been an amazing experience, serving back here over the past 11 years to this new council. I'm going to wish you nothing but success moving forward with all the changes that we're dealing with, both in the city of Evanston as well as nationwide. I'm confident in what you will continue to do. And if there's, any advice that I can share is just, we have an amazing staff that work very hard on behalf of our city. And I see a lot of the directors here, and I just want to say thank you very much for the many years of support that you've provided, not only to myself, but more importantly, the residents of the Second Ward, as well as the city of Evanston. I will miss working very closely with you all. There are so many people. I see Alderman Simmons in the office, my son Peter, and Melissa from our previous council. I have to shout out to Brother Lionel Jean-Baptiste, who I know is on the call, who opened the door for me to serve, as well as Mayor Tisdall with the appointment. So I'm not going anywhere. I will still continue to live and serve in different capacities in this town. So it's really not a goodbye, but a welcome to doing new things with more focus. And so thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, City Manager Gandursky, our staff and the community that's here. I will miss serving in this capacity, but as you can see with my family, I'm looking forward to some other things to do with my life. So thank you all very much for your presence here.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, as the person who has served the longest with you here, I wanted to say a few words. First, I heard about you before you ever took that seat, and I heard about you from Lionel Jean-Baptiste, because when Lionel said that he was leaving, I said to him, who's next? And he said, there's somebody really good coming. And it was you, Peter. And since the first moment you sat down there, it has been a privilege to work with you. And I think about all of the issues that we worked on. The mayor talked about just a few. You led the way on alternatives to arrest. You've been on WEBE for the whole time. Reparations with Alderman Ruth Simmons happened because, and has been led because of, so much because of you. As the mayor said, you have been there supporting Black businesses and economic development on countless other issues. And I will so miss our collaboration, our phone calls, our long talks, and your wisdom. I think, that is something that I have valued so much throughout all of this time. I have things in my head that I think about, no, Peter would say this to me on this. And I need to pay attention to that. Before I get too emotional, I just want to say thank you so much. But also, I really want to thank your wife and your family, because they really do as much service as we do up here. And so it's really critical to thank you. So we will miss you, but I'm so glad you're not going far, because I'm going to be on the phone.
I would hope so.
Okay. Thank you so much, Peter.
Councilmember Burns.
Because I was going to reserve this for call of the wards, which is at the end of the meeting, but he has families and friends here, so I want to make my comments now. The first thing that stands out, has always stood out about Peter, is that he approaches this work with so much respect for it, and it's clear. The brother's suits are pressed, the shoes are clean. The bald head, I'm still trying to figure out how to get my bald head as clean as his. It's clean, the glasses is Windex to something. And I don't say that I need glasses. So everything is pristine. And he shows up in the right way, and it's consistent over and over and over again, year after year. He's showing up. And how you show up says a lot about how you value the role and how you value the importance and the responsibility that we have to serve the public. It's a tremendous responsibility, and it's such an honor. And I think that's the first thing that I always noticed, that he suits up and he looks the part and he plays the part, and he does it on a consistent basis. I always appreciate elected officials, people in general, but certainly elected officials, when you need to understand where they are on an issue, so you know how you need to talk to them and persuade them and work with them, that they are not wishy-washy, that you know where they stand on issues, and it's consistent, it's predictable. Because they have values and they're transparent about those values. And that's Peter, 100%, right? And it's great to have a working relationship with somebody that's consistent, that's not wishy-washy. You know where he stands, and I've appreciated that. And the second thing is, we agree on a lot of issues, but I think what shows me the most in people is what happens when we disagree. And even when we've disagreed, he's never drawn hard lines in the sand. You've never abandoned me, because I've needed you even after we've disagreed, so that we can work on the things we agree on. And that has been so important to me. And not just waiting for me to call. Oftentimes you'll call me, hey, little bro, let's talk about this. And I appreciate that. I think we all really, need someone, and when we're in this position, that we can rely on to help counsel us and tell us what we need to hear. So, it's so sad to see you leave, but again, I know, as someone myself that is trying to get better at kind of work and home life balance, that you've done your time here, you've done it with a lot of dignity, and I'm looking forward to the time you're going to be able to spend with your family and friends, and wish you well. Thank you.
Councilmember Ravel.
Well, Peter, I'm just going to add a few words. echoing actually some of the things that Melissa mentioned. You've been a wonderful champion, obviously, for reparations, a wonderful champion for I never get the initials right, MWEBE initiatives. And, but for me personally, I've really appreciated serving with you on the Alternatives to Arrest Committee. And I learned so much from your commitment to making the changes so that our young people in our community wouldn't be held back by a small mistake, and that there were ways to repair the harm and then not have a barrier then later in life to getting a job and leading a successful life. And so your commitment and your leadership in that Alternatives to Arrest Committee was just really, I learned so much from you, and really that's having a huge impact in our community and for our young people. So I'm going to miss you here on the dais and your steady, thoughtful comments and contributions, but I'm sure I'll see you around. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I'm just going to add, I spoke to this at the last meeting, but the great thing about you, Councilmember Braithwaite, is that regardless of your title, whether you're a council member or you're resident citizen Braithwaite, you have a commitment to serving the community. And there are so many young folks, or just folks overall in our community, Second Ward, throughout the city, you know, whether they're Jamaican immigrants or other immigrants or black folks, that have benefited from your dedication, your knowledge, and your ability to connect folks with the resources that they need in the times that are hardest for folks. And so the great thing is that I think the Second Ward is going to have I don't want to put anything on you and your family, but they're going to have double representation in that I know that you're still going to be there and still be someone that folks know they can reach out to, and you'll know exactly where to point them. And that in those folks' lives, I think is huge. And so I'm glad that you'll be able to continue doing that regardless of your title.
Thank you.
Councilmember Nusma.
To quote a council member I look up to and respect, I want to be mindful of time. So I will keep my remarks short and just say thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Councilmember Kelly.
So I'd also like to say thank you. I've really valued being on this end, being your neighbor at this end of the dais, your relentless support. Even if we've had differences, you've always supported me with alacrity, helping me understand the rules. This last year was kind of hard for me as I finished up my teaching career while also being a council member. You've always been there. Thank you so much. And again, I also appreciate your deep appreciation for this role. I've understood that sitting next to you. I've admired it, how much you put into it. Truly, it's impressive, and I've learned a lot from you. Thank you for your commitment to the community. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
I know I'm the new guy up here, and so I haven't had as much time to work with Peter, but I really appreciate all that you've done for the city and the community. And just because you're stepping down doesn't mean I won't be bugging you and reaching out and hopefully picking your brain some more about this job. Thanks.
Thank you.
Kelly Gandursky.
Councilmember Braithwaite, I would be remiss if I didn't thank you on behalf of our staff for all of your hard work and dedication. This is the second council I've served with you on now, and I've gotten to know you, know your work. And I think while the community may understand that the work you've chosen to do and understand what the issues that are important to you, I think what people really should understand is that you tend to lead with your heart, and that you really deeply love and care about this community and about every person that lives in Evanston. And you're the type of person that, regardless of whether someone is mopping a floor here in the Civic Center or running the city, you make it a point to get to know that person's name and understand who they are because you care. And you will be truly missed. I appreciate your tutelage as well in bringing me up to speed on some of the historical events of Evanston, and as well as mentoring me through some trying times. We've had some serious conversations, and then there are times where you've gotten a few laughs out of me too, which I really appreciate. On behalf of the staff, we can't thank you enough for your service and for just being who you are.
Thank you very much.
Let's give Councilmember Braithwaite one more round of applause.
Thank you all.
The next one of my announcements is perhaps structurally analogous to what we just did. Kelly Gandursky came to the city as corporation counsel in the early parts of 2020, essentially as the world was beginning to change. A year later was promoted to be the deputy city manager, and basically half a year after that was made interim city manager, which was going to be a very brief, quick, and simple assignment. So now we sit most of a year later, during which most of a year that simple assignment included simple tasks like beginning the preparation of a budget, working on collective bargaining, grappling with any number of difficult issues related to the capital challenges and the policy challenges and the organizational challenges, opening up our entire summer recreation programs, and particularly the lakefront programs, in the midst of both the pandemic and in the wake of scandal. We wound up asking Kelly to do way more than she signed up for. And she did it cheerfully, she did it with dedication, and she did it well. And tonight is her last night. In fact, I think she's got about 5 hours left on the city payroll, which she's choosing to utilize in a manner that I think indicates her commitment to this work and this organization. And I know that we're all going to miss her a great deal. I know that we all feel fortunate for the good that she's done here, and I hope we're all cognizant of the enormous challenge and frankly how a lot of people wouldn't have been able to do that job well, but she was able to. And I know it's been difficult, but I hope it's been gratifying to be a part of serving 78,000 people in a time of real need. And I hope that as you move on to this next phase, this experience will be helpful to you. I think it's been an astonishing amount of trial by fire that you've come through, not just unscathed, but stronger and with flying colors. And again, I'm enormously appreciative. I'm sure that we are all here enormously appreciative. And I think it's an example for all of us about how dedication to service can obligate us to do things we didn't plan to do things we didn't promise to do things we didn't agree to do, but do things that the moment demands. And every time the moment made a demand, you were there to meet it. So Kelly Gandursky, thank you so much for all you've done for this community.
Mayor Biss, members of City Council, Mayor, thank you for those very kind words. I want to thank the residents of Evanston for taking a chance on me and allowing me to lead this organization over the past year. It has been an experience of my life, and it has been a pleasure to serve. I have been given a tremendous opportunity to not only lead some of the finest staff I've ever met, but also to implement some programs and some policies that really matter to people's everyday quality of life. And that is not nothing. We do this work to try to do a little bit of good every day before we rest our heads to the pillows to think, what could we do to help somebody else? And that's why I do this work. I want to thank my staff, specifically and especially Dave Stoneback and Luke Stowe for stepping up as deputy city managers and being right by my side the entire time. I want to thank all of the directors who are standing in the back here and all the ones that are online and couldn't make it today. I want to thank Chief Richard Eddington for coming back, being called back into service again when we needed him. He's a tremendous individual and a tremendous man. And again, we do this work because we care about the people. I can't say enough about what I've learned from all of my staff members and how they have encouraged me along the way, how they've challenged me along the way, and how they've helped me along the way. And I also can't say enough about the council, whether we've agreed or disagreed. You've all worked to make me a better city manager and a better individual. I leave a little piece of my heart behind here in Evanston, and I'm a phone call away if anybody needs me, and I will be back to visit. And it is a beautiful community, and it has a lot of resources to offer, and more than that, it has so much more potential. So thank you for letting me be a part of this experience. I think I might have made history as having 3 positions in 2.5 years almost. So we'll mark that one in the history books, but I can't thank you all enough.
Councilmember Nusma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Kelly. I want to be mindful of the time, so I will keep this short. But stepping into an interim role is an incredibly challenging task, knowing that you're going into a job that's probably not going to be yours or may not be yours for a long time, and having to assume command and take over and steer a ship that was in some stormy seas and get us on a course and stabilize that ship. And Kelly has done this, and I am immensely grateful for the work she's done. I'm just going to cite 2 examples. Number one, getting our beaches open on time. It was an enormous challenge that happened behind the scenes, invisible to most folks in the community, and not really something that City Council was really tracking very closely. But that required a lot of work, and Kelly and her team made sure that happened. So that's just one thing I wanted to acknowledge. And also Kelly's work with the task force to end homelessness. This was Kelly's idea. Kelly was behind this, and we're going to miss her in that capacity. So please expect some phone calls on that one.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't even know where to begin. We've had so many good conversations. I want to thank you very much for your commitment to the town and also your professionalism that you bring to this job. You show up every day. I will return your comment by saying you also lead with your heart. You stepped in during a very difficult time of transition, and you kept the flame up in the air. And so I wish you all the best in your new role. I'm sure we will continue to stay in touch, and I will definitely miss our Friday one-on-ones. You have my love and support. Now, always a phone call away.
Councilmember Wynn.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to echo what the others have said, Kelly, but Interim City Manager Gandursky. And thank you so much for your service. When you first stepped in as our corporation counsel, I was so impressed by your legal skills, your professionalism, your ability to counsel us as corporation counsel. And then when we needed you to step up again, you did that just as well. And as the others have said, your professionalism, your commitment, and your heart is here in Evanston, and we can tell. And so I want to thank you for that, because you have really played an instrumental role in the stormy seas that we've been in. So thank you.
Councilmember Ravel.
Well, I could echo exactly what my colleagues have said, Kelly, but I want to also let you know you've got a huge fan base out in the community, and in particular, I'm thinking about your supporters at Canal Shores, because you really helped in so many ways with a lot of tricky issues and situations that Canal Shores had to deal with, and they are enormously grateful and really wish you all the best, as do I. So thank you on behalf of Canal Shores as well as myself.
Councilmember Reed.
Just in interest of time, I'll just say thank you, Kelly. It's been wonderful to serve with you, and really, especially my new capacity as a council member, to get the opportunity to really work with you and have regular meetings with you. And so it's been a delight, and congratulations on your new position with Elrod, which I think it's wonderful that you'll be there.
Councilmember Kelly.
I also want to say thank you and congratulations. And thank you recently for rolling up your sleeves and getting involved with some issues to help really resolve some tricky situations. So thank you very much.
Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, I'll just keep it quick. One has a lot of, Kelly is well liked from staff. A lot of good reviews from talking to staff, from managers to directors. And I think immediately when she came in as interim, I got a lot of good reviews from staff that we were headed in the right direction, and there was a lot of confidence in you. I think separately, personally, I just love hard-nosed professionals that get stuff done and don't make excuses. Not to get too astrological, but we're both Aries and just get stuff done and no excuses and want to put points on the board, and that's what you represent. So it's been really easy to work with you, and wish you the best.
Let's give Kelly Gandursky one more hand, please. Now, the final item from the mayor's announcements is a proclamation in recognition of former Fifth Ward Council member Robin Rue Simmons. And I want to say a word about where this came from, because I do think it speaks to something that's important tonight. Councilmember Braithwaite observed that cities all over the country are honoring Robin Rue Simmons, are recognizing her for the path-breaking work that she's done here. Where the heck are we? Where are we in recognizing our own? And I say that both because I think he's right, and also because I think it speaks a little bit to your character, that on the night that we're saying thank you to you, you want to make sure that we thank somebody else. I think that says a lot about you, Peter. Robin's work on this council is, in fact, in the eyes of the whole world, with good reason, and it's an enormous point of pride of this city with good reason. And I think that when we're proud of work, we benefit by being clear about who did that work and where the progress came from. And so I'm very, very pleased to issue this, which reads as follows. Whereas Robin Rue Simmons served as alderman of the 5th Ward in Evanston from 2017 to 2021, and whereas prior to serving as alderman, she was appointed by the mayor of Evanston to the Minority Women Local Business Enterprise Committee, and during her time as alderman, she served on and chaired several committees. And whereas Robin Rue Simmons led many policy improvements and programming initiatives while in office, and whereas Robin Rue Simmons' most rewarding and honorable accomplishment was her work on advocating for reparations for African Americans, and whereas Robin Rue Simmons led the passage of the United States' first government-funded reparations legislation, and whereas in March of 2021, Robin Rue Simmons was selected to serve on the National African American Reparations Commission, and whereas her other awards and acknowledgments include, but are certainly not limited to, Woman of the Year and induction into the Civil Rights Hall of Fame, and whereas the first 16 beneficiaries of Evanston's historic local reparations restorative housing program were selected in May of 2022, Therefore, on behalf of the mayor and the City Council of Evanston, we hereby recognize, thank, and honor former Fifth Ward Alderman Robin Simmons for her continued dedication to public service on this 11th day of July, 2022. That concludes Mayor's announcements for the evening. Next on the agenda is the City Manager's public announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to call to the podium Allison Lepsinger, our policy coordinator, to talk about guaranteed income.
Do we have a clicker? Oh, one of these? Not this one. Okay. Yeah, okay, great. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to try and keep it quick and do a quick update on the city's guaranteed income pilot program. So as you know, this is a joint project with Northwestern University and the city of Evanston in large part due to the very hard work of former council member Cicely Fleming. She and Dave Davis from Northwestern's Office of Neighborhood and Community Relations really brought this to the city a little over a year ago and have done a ton of work and continue to be involved in really moving the ball forward. So I'm very grateful to them. Our funding is in part ARPA dollars that you approved last year, a portion of Northwestern's Good Neighbor Fund, the Evanston Community Foundation, which brings our project budget to $1.165 million. $900,000 of that will go to direct payments to Evanston residents. 150 community members will get $500 a month for 1 year. This is all the same as last year. And it's worth noting there's a large research component because an Illinois law says that if you're already getting benefits and you all of a sudden get $500 a month more because of one of these programs, instead of kicking you off those benefits, as long as the program is time limited, which ours is for a year, and has a research component, you get to keep your benefits. So that's really important. We will be opening applications August 15th through August 29th. It is really exciting to say that and a little bit scary. The same three groups will be eligible that we talked about before: 18 to 24-year-olds, 62 years and older, undocumented community members. Everyone must be an Evanston resident, and everyone's household income must be at or below 250% of the federal poverty line. People will apply for those 2 weeks in August. It is not first come, first serve. So that application's open for 2 weeks. You don't have to apply on day one. It's not going to help you get chosen. Then we're going to scrub the data. We'll give the anonymized data to Northwestern researchers who will plug it into their research-approved formula and tell us which 50 people are going to be in each of the 3 groups. They will not know who they're picking because we're going to give them anonymized data. We will not know who they're picking. We're not going to pick our buddies. We're not going to pick your favorite constituents. It's important for people to understand this is a randomized controlled study. And then our Health and Human Service staff will contact the 150 participants and schedule them for onboarding. That's likely to take a long time. So we anticipate the initial payments will be either October 1st or November 1st. I'm rooting for October 1st, and I've been told that that's not likely, but a girl can dream. And then a few other things to note. The applications will be in Spanish, Arabic, and Haitian Creole. We will be collaborating with Parks and Rec staff, library staff, and 311 staff so they can answer questions and help fill out applications if necessary. We'll have at least 2 information sessions just before and during the application period so that we can help folks out. Our website, our webpage on the city's website is live. It's cityofelvanston.org/GI. When the application is available and the application period is open, it'll be there. Right now, there's an interest form that people can fill out if they want to be alerted. And research participants will be compensated. So not only are there 150 people who are going to be getting $500 a month for a year, but there's also a control group. And so that control group, though they won't be getting the $500, they will be compensated for any surveys and interviews that they do. And that allotment is going to be, it's $90,000 of research. So $990,000 of the 1.165 are going directly into Evanston residents' pockets. I'm happy to answer any questions. That's our update.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I should say that if Indira Perkins from HHS and Cicely Fleming are on the line if you have questions for them as well.
Seeing no questions, we'll move ahead. Thank you very much for that very exciting update. The one thing I'll say is I think all of those of us up here with platforms of elected officials will could help this out by broadcasting the application information when it becomes available. Certainly I plan to do that, and I hope all of us can be a part of that. This brings us to public comment. This evening, every public comment participant will be given 2 minutes. And as always, we begin with those who signed up in person to speak in person, starting with Rose Johnson.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Ms. City Manager, and City Council members. I'm Rose Johnson, a 50-year resident of our city. I am the immediate past president of the Family Focus Evanston Auxiliary Board, on which I have served for 15 years about, and I am a board member of the governing board of the recently merged Family Focus Board of Directors. That's for the past 3 years. The work has begun on the Foster Center Our Place vision for the Weisbord Homes building. The ARPA funds that you will consider this evening will help to begin to realize the vision for a centrally located home for social service agencies accessible to residents of the 5th Ward and others. The building's history and future are very important to present and future users of those social services. Thank you so much for your attention, and thank you in particular, Councilmember Burns, for your assistance and participation before you became an alderman. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Eric Passett. If he's no longer here, we'll move ahead to Rob Bush.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Rob Bush. I am the present chair of the Evanston Park and Recreation Board. I am a 42-year resident of the city of Evanston. From the last speaker, it seems like a shorter time than I thought it would be. I am also the former chair and a member of the Housing Commission. Most of my 45 years as an attorney, I have been representing Illinois municipalities, primarily other local governments, including park districts. The charge of the Park and Recreation Board is to assess and evaluate proposals that are submitted to it for consideration and make recommendations to the City Council and the Human Services Committee on our thoughts on those recommendations or on those submissions. I'm here to speak about the proposed change to City Code Section 7-10-2, which proposes to change the hours of park openings from 11 to 6 to 24/7. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a solution in dire need of a problem. And my ask of you and the ask of the Park Board tonight is to take this off the consent agenda. I see no reason why it is on a consent agenda, which is where you all vote to move something along. Take it off the consent agenda and do one of two things. One, vote it down tonight. Or two, send it back to the Park and Recreation Board to conduct surveys and community meetings.
15 seconds.
Pardon me?
15 seconds.
15 seconds. To get some input from the residents. This is a major change to our park hours, and it is being foisted upon you with no input whatsoever from residents. We've had input on dog parks, input on skate parks, we've had input on city managers, we've had input on community gardens, and yet no one has ever asked any of the residents who live at or near parks whether they think this is a good idea.
Time.
One more point, though. You mentioned tonight studies about the homeless. And the homeless are going to be one of the groups that are going to be most at risk from doing this. Because it's going to be the homeless that is going to be using the parks mostly between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m.
Thank you very
And
much.
nothing for anyone.
Thank you very much.
Nothing good ever happened in a park
Thank you.
after 11 p.m. Thank you.
The next speaker is Sue Lolbach.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Sue Lolbach. I work at Connections for the Homeless, and I'm actually speaking about the Margarita Inn tonight instead of affordable housing, as I usually do. Given the story that ran in Evanston now and Connections' intention to purchase the Margarita Inn for permanent use, we wanted to make a statement now tonight. We submitted this information as the other side of the story to Evanston now, and they did publish an update. We had an incident at the Margarita Inn on July 5th involving one of our residents, the son of the Margarita Inn's owner, and ultimately the police. It was not handled in the way our policy dictates, nor in a way we would have preferred. As you know, the Margarita Inn is staffed with 15 full-time professionals who are specially trained to de-escalate stressful or intense situations. All of them have experienced homelessness, which means all have experienced trauma, and many have experienced significant trauma by being the victim of violence and crime. That's why the Margarita Inn is so important. It gives people a chance to catch their breath, organize their lives in a stable and supportive environment, and ultimately move on to a stable living arrangement. Things did not go as planned on July 5th. While we're still investigating the details and what triggered the confrontation, it's fair to say that the owner's son saw behavior he didn't feel was appropriate and confronted the resident. Having a non-staff member confront a participant is not how we agreed to partner with the owner and his staff. Rather, we agreed that any concerns from his staff would be directed to a Connections staffer. At the same time, We understand the concerns of the owner's son, and we will work with the owner and his team to make sure everyone is clear on our agreed process going forward.
15
Unfortunately,
seconds.
the escalation was such that the police had to be called. The resident was arrested and removed from the Margarita, where he will no longer be allowed to return. That's the right decision based on what happened. The safety of our residents, staff, and neighbors is our top priority. And at the same time, we regret that we won't have the chance to help that former resident get the help he so desperately needs. None of us are naive about the challenges the homeless face and the challenges faced by the communities in which they live. Ending homelessness isn't easy, but one thing we do know for certain, homelessness doesn't just go away if you ignore it. We have to
Thank you
face
very
it
much.
to fix it. Connections will continue its work to do just that.
Thank you very much.
And to include the Margarita Inn as a new, exciting, innovative tool with which to do so.
The next speaker will be Pastor Monte Dillard, Sr.
Mayor, City Council, to my wonderful Alderman Burns, Lottie Dottie, and everybody, good evening. I am Pastor Monte Dillard Sr. I have the distinct privilege of serving for the last 12 years as the senior pastor of the First Church of God Christian Life Center, a church that has served the Evanston community for 112 years. More specifically, tonight, I am here as the chairperson of Evanston Own It. Evanston Own It is a Christian non-for-profit organization comprised primarily of clergy from the 5th and 2nd wards with a mission to provide sustainable support financially, socially, and spiritually to particularly young people in the 5th and 2nd wards. Of our accomplishments, we are proud that for the last several years to have now contributed $60,000 to the Mayor's Summer Youth Employment Program, amongst other things. Tonight, I have come representing Evanston Own It, the letter of appreciation and commendation to the outgoing alderman of the 2nd Ward, who has been a tremendous asset and blessing to us. And it reads as such: Alderman Peter Braithwaite, on behalf of the members of Evanston Own It, we express our deepest gratitude for your many years of public service. Your participation and support of Evanston Own It as the 2nd Ward Alderman has been invaluable to our organization. Your presence on the City Council since 2011 always gave the citizens of Evanston a strong sense of good governance, leadership, and a voice of one that called us all to accountability. This was demonstrated by your efforts to provide workforce development opportunities for all residents. Your advocacy for affordable housing, senior and youth services, and keeping our neighborhoods safe all embody the mission of Evanston Own It, and we say thank you for all that you have accomplished. We wish you continued success and favor in this next chapter of your life. We'll continue to strive for excellence, continue to remain one of those voices calling out from the wilderness, challenging us to be our best selves. With sincere gratitude, Pastor Monte Dillard, chairperson, and the members of Evanston Own It. Thank you, sir.
That concludes the list of people who signed up in person to speak in person. So we now move to those who signed up online to speak in person, beginning with Chris Dillow. Yep.
Hi, am I on? Yep.
Yep. Sure. Okay. Go ahead. I think you signed up in error, but it's fine. You can go ahead now.
I signed up to be there, but it started early, so I jumped on the Zoom, or at least I didn't realize when it started. All right, so I want to say this. It is true on Tuesday, a resident of the Margarita Inn who had been previously charged with violent crimes was discovered masturbating in front of a child at the Margarita Inn. And I, for one, unlike Connections for the Homeless, appreciate the fact that the person that was there stopped him from doing that. And the fact that he didn't go find someone else that was trained in de-escalation, I'm going to go with that. I think that's a fine thing that he did. And I also feel like that the operations that would allow a person like this to be in a position to masturbate in front of a child where someone such as the person that caught him asked him to stop and was attacked in that moment, and this individual went on to attack a police officer and was tased and was arrested, I believe speaks more to the operations of Connections for the Homeless in the Margarita Inn than it does for the person that took it upon themselves to try to stop that action. And I also want to say that that night on 7/5, all the aldermen were informed of a very serious event that happened at the Margarita Inn, and that also the Fourth Ward alderman was also contacted by the director of Connections for the Homeless. Now, interestingly, from that point until literally today, over 60 crimes and incidents have been reported in the police blotter, except for this one. Now, when asked about why that happened, we've been told that perhaps it was filtered because it was a minor crime. That was from the Fourth Ward alderman. That the report was being revised, that the report was being edited, and that the officer was on vacation. There were half-truths that were being told to other residents, all while this alderman knew the seriousness of the incident. And as you just heard earlier, Connections for the Homeless would rather call attention to the action of the person that stopped the event than their own operations, and apologize to the victim or the residents of Evanston. Now,
15 seconds.
Honestly, I didn't come here. Wow. What I did come here to say is there has been multiple incidents for the Connections of Homeless, including sexual assault, calls from a man with a gun, assault with a knife and battery, resident accosted neighbors with a brick, and assaulted with a knife and a witness, all of which Connections for the Homeless has thwarted the efforts and investigation of the Evanston police. And I would call for, and will do my best to call for, a investigation to the policies and Connections for the Homeless history of thwarting the police, because literally this is 4 events and there are hundreds, and these are the only ones that we've had time to do a FOIA for. And I do request that we put a stop to the progression of moving Connections for the Homeless into the Margarita Inn until we truly understand what kind of neighbor is being endorsed by this council. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Greg Andrews.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So later on tonight, we're going to hear a lot about ranked choice voting. We're going to hear from experts on both sides, for and against it, and there's going to be probably a big debate between you all. But I just want to say that tonight's vote is not about making ranked choice vote the way that we do elections in Evanston. Tonight's vote is about letting us decide how we do elections in Evanston. The manner in which we elect our representatives, that's all of you, is probably one of the most important decisions that a representative democracy can make. And it's why I'm asking you to put it on the ballot. A lot of you may, or some of you may, not feel that ranked choice voting is right. Some of you may feel that ranked choice voting is the way that we should be going. And I really hope that you all get the chance to vote that way in November. I just think that the debate over ranked choice voting should be more than however long it takes tonight. Probably in the next 3 hours or so, you'll be talking about it. It shouldn't be a 3-hour discussion. It should be a 3-month discussion. And it shouldn't just be the 9 of you. It should be all of the people that you represent who get to weigh in on this issue. So thank you very much. When I wrote this, I thought I had a minute, so I'll yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mary Rosinski.
Hi, my name is Mary Rosinski, and I'm here to speak on 3 issues: the park hours, the city manager search, and the Civic Center. First of all, I want to say I appreciate Bob Bush and all that he said and done with this park. I agree 100%. The 24-hour park hours is probably not the best solution to whatever problem it's trying to solve. We have 76 parks and tot lots. I am on the Parks and Rec Board too, so I'm speaking as a resident though, and as a realtor, because I think that without the voice of the people that live near, the thousands of people that live near these parks, we're putting the burden of enforcement on them. And I don't think that was the intent of this, but that's one of the unintended consequences. The other thing is we have to talk about the value of rents and property values. And one of the things I know one of the questions I get often when I'm showing properties on or near a park is, what are the park hours? Because people don't want a lot of noise. They're trying to sleep. They are trying to put their kids to bed, and they're going out to their alleys. And there's a certain safety factor that we need to know, which brings the next question is, then are we going to need to have a lot more light, which incurs more light pollution? Or do we need park rangers, which incurs a budget pollution? So I just want to say, I think that Bob's point is right. If you do decide not to vote this down, then please do decide to get all the public involved in this, because this is no small matter. The second question I had was about the city manager search, because the city manager is the most important job in the city. They set the culture of welcomeness. They set the culture of the budget. They set the tone for the city. Okay, so I hope that everyone comes or participates tomorrow night, and that you recognize that. And the third thing is the Civic Center, and that we really have a robust discussion about how to reuse the Civic Center. And it can be a fabulous place. It's the best location. People don't have to. We can share this space with someone else. We could be visionary, and it's actually less expensive than taking valuable property off the downtown tax records. So I know I'm done, but thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Francine Allen.
Thank you very much. It's been about 18 or more months now since I found myself in a situation with a complete sewer failure in my home. The home was on Elgin Road, which is Gulf Road, which is a state road. The cost to repair this sewer failure was $45,000. I have been working with the Public Works Committee, and we've been having a lot of discussions back and forth about what can be done to assist residents such as myself or others who find themselves in this type of destabilizing financial situation. If my home were around the corner, it would have cost about $8,000 to $10,000 to repair the same type of lateral sewer collapse. Homeowners insurance does not cover this. Even if somebody has a special sewer supplement, it typically only covers $8,000 to $10,000. A video imaging of your sewer system would not diagnose this problem. It could be clear today and completely gone tomorrow. We've had a lot of discussions about what can be done to help people in my situations. There's been a couple proposals, the most recently in March from Councilwoman Kelly, and I'm just asking that this type of discussion continues, and this topic is put on some upcoming agenda items for the Public Works Committee, so we can move forward with some sort of resolution for myself and others in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you. The final in-person speaker will be Vanessa Johnson. Sorry, Vanessa Johnson McCoy.
Yeah, get that McCoy in so my husband doesn't get mad.
No, I felt it come into my mouth and I realized there's a problem. It's blame the spreadsheet.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to everyone. Wow, there are a number of things I could comment on the agenda, but to be mindful of the 2 minutes that I am allotted, I will speak on what I originally signed up to do, which is to thank my second ward council member, Braithwaite, for his service. I've been a second ward resident. Well, I grew up in the second ward, but I've been a homeowner for, 15 years or however many. I got more involved in the community and in the ward since I became a full-time realtor about 7 years ago. And I just so appreciate you, Councilman Braithwaite, and your responsiveness, your commitment to keeping your cool, even when the Pittner and Dempster building was, and there were people that weren't so nice with their comments to you. You maintained your dignity, your integrity, and you were so kind in your words. and your responses. And I just appreciate the professionalism and just all about you. You've been, even personally, when I've called about my block, my property, my whatever, you've just been responsive. And I just want to say thank you. I'll say on behalf of all of the Second Ward residents, but especially for me and my family. We love you. We appreciate your service. And thank you so much. Best wishes with whatever you're going to be doing next. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. We now move to those who signed up online to speak online, beginning with Councilmember Dolores Holmes, followed by Councilmember Lionel Jean-Baptiste, and then Stephen Vick.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, City Clerk, Interim City Manager, and to the rest of my Evanston residents. First, let me just congratulate Alderman Ruth Simmons for her hard work. It was so deserved, and I'm so glad that we in Evanston have finally acknowledged you. I'm here tonight to express my gratitude to Alderman, City Councilman, Peter Braithwaite. I'm trying to be politically correct, Peter, by using the councilman rather than the alderman. But you know, old dogs, it's hard to have new tricks for old dogs. Having served 6 years with you, I know how dedicated, committed, and how serious you are about serving the Second Ward and the city of Evanston in its entirety, especially our Black community. Oh, you are so steadfast, and I know that is because of your faith. I have learned a lot from you, my friend, and I know we did some really good things together while on the council. I will always remember, and I hope others will too, your question when issues come up. What are we trying to solve? May I suggest all you really try to remember that when you're addressing those issues? Thank you, sir. All I can say is job well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Councilmember Judge Lionel Jean-Baptiste, who will be followed by Stephen Vick and then Mike Vasilko.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I don't know whether my video is.
It looks like your camera is off.
Yes, blocked. Probably because I'm appearing as domestic relations, and I don't want anybody to be afraid I can rename myself. Domestic relations is about the best interest of children, so I'm not going after anybody for child support or maintenance or anything like that. But if you can hear me, we can hear you. about Alderman Braithwaite for his work as the alderman of the Second Ward. When Peter was asked to step into the role to serve the ward, there was talk about him coming in to fill my shoes. And I had to tell Peter that I left with my shoes, just like Alderman Drummer did when I had to follow him. So, Peter, you have done an extraordinary level of work, consistency. You've been ethical, and you've built great relationships with the business community, the faith community, with the residents, being transparent, maintaining meetings on a consistent basis. So I really appreciate your work, and you're an example that we should all continue to follow. I also want to, wish on us collectively a great choice to follow Peter so that we can continue to have quality representation in the Second Ward, whatever that choice might be. I also want to take a minute to congratulate Robin Simmons for the proclamation, Mayor. And I would say that in celebrating her, we must celebrate ourselves, folks. The city of Evanston has been on the cutting edge of these fights over the longest period of time. We were the first to desegregate schools. We were the first to declare ourselves a nuclear-free zone. We took a position against the war in Iraq. We've been bold. And so we all need to take pride in the fact that we stand for righteousness and will continue to be brave. And so in celebrating Robin Ruth Simmons, we celebrate the best of ourselves. So thank you very much for continuing to do great work, the rest of you members of the City Council. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. The next speaker is Stephen Vick, who will be followed by Mike Vasilko and then Annie Coakley.
Good evening, everybody. First, I want to thank Peter Braithwaite, Alderman Braithwaite. As the Executive Director of the Infant Welfare Society of Evanston, he has been our second ward alderman. He's been incredible, responsive, and we met when we were 14 and graduated ETHS together, so he's truly a brother of mine. But I'm here tonight in support of Family Focus. I've been the Executive Director of Infant Welfare Society of Evanston for 7 years. I was on the Foster Community Our Place Committee. I'm on the steering committee of the Early Childhood Council here in Evanston, and obviously grew up in Evanston. Infant Welfare Society of Evanston's been around for over 110 years and served generations of families. One of our sites, the Teen Baby Nursery, sits in the Family Focus building in the 5th Ward, and I'm strongly in favor of the ARPA money supporting the renovation and revisioning of this building. I can't tell you from a tenant's perspective, the children, families, adults, literally thousands of people that participate in Family Focus are not just there for Family Focus. They're there from dozens of organizations. The building has programs and services that serve our community. And what's incredible about this opportunity is that we have $1 million graciously given from Robin Gable. We're requesting these ARPA funds of $3 million that truly are serving what their intention was, families that have been disproportionately impacted in the 5th Ward and that participate in Family Focus. And I think most importantly, Family Focus has committed to bring in dollars as well. So it's truly a collaborative effort to reimagine an incredible building that will be part of an incredible campus with the new school that's being built. So I strongly urge the council to support the ARPA funds and help collaboratively create an incredible space, not only for Family Focus, but for Infant Welfare Society of Evanston and the other organizations that participate in serving our children and families. So thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Mike Vasilko, who will be followed by Annie Coakley and then Benjamin Page.
Thank you. Just quickly, I spoke at AP&W, and I just want to reiterate that I don't support spending what will end up being an additional $450,000 of debt for item A6 on your agenda, nor do I support spending an additional $35 million to be followed by an additional $20 million later in debt for item A9, without knowing where that money is coming from, other than it's a loan and who's paying for it. With the water funds, item A6, I think it was David Stonebeck who said, you know, that we wouldn't be raising water fees to pay for that, and yet there's item A9, we wouldn't be raising water fees, but the same packet says that we will be raising water fees. So I'm not sure how that money is being paid for, how that loan is being paid for. I'm also speaking against, tonight at least, for ranked choice voting, only because our ward hasn't had a meeting to discuss the ranked choice voting and what it means and what it doesn't mean. And I don't know why the council continues to support an alderman who can't conduct ward meetings and inform his constituents, but the rest of the council seems to think that's okay. I'd also like to know why.
15 seconds.
What the purpose of the meeting is tomorrow night, Mr. Mayor, because I understand from published reports that the council is kind of coalescing around one runner-up candidate. I guess this was spoken of at the 4th Ward meeting that I read about.
Time.
And I guess I'd like to know why these things keep spinning out, and yet you're going to conduct a meeting telling us what the process is. It sounds like you've already selected the next city manager, and we'd just like to know who that is.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Annie Coakley, who will be followed by Benjamin Page and then Betty Esther.
Good evening, Mayor Biss, members of the City Council, and Clerk Mendoza. I'm Annie Coakley. I'm the Director of Downtown Evanston, and I'm here to request your support for funding for the Chicago North Shore and Convention and Visitor Bureau on behalf of Downtown Evanston, Central Street Evanston, and Main Dumpster Mile. We recommend their funding in our role as economic development practitioners and leaders of the special service area districts that rely on this partnership which helps us reach consumers outside of Evanston as well as regional, national, and international visitors. Without the Bureau's partnership, we would not have the extensive audience we would not be able to reach the extensive audience with our limited advertising dollars. All 3 of these organizations participate in co-op advertising programs to purchase radio ads, ads on the CTA train, and digital ads, and they have effectively promoted summer events and holiday shopping throughout the years. Without their reduced pricing offered through the volume power of which the Bureau has and we do not, some of these advertising would be completely out of reach for our organizations. If Chicago's North Shore Convention and Visitor Bureau does not receive their annual funding request, the City of Evanston's membership will be terminated, which means that all the individual businesses that are currently members will no longer be able to participate in the Bureau per their bylaws. Furthermore, Evanston will become the only municipality with hotels in the Chicagoland area not receiving Bureau representation. Without Bureau representation, Evanston will lose access to state tourism funding that is granted to each state certified bureau. It is important to note that once a municipality ends the relationship, they cannot rejoin the Bureau and receive any of these additional regional marketing support for 3 years. Most importantly, the Bureau's meeting, conference, sales leads will go to Skokie, Glenview, Northbrook, and other suburbs. This is why we are requesting that you support their funding for the 2022 year. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Benjamin Page, who will be followed by Betty Esther and then Jay Young.
Good evening. I'm Ben Page. I'm a professor at Northwestern, and I specialize in democratic decision making, which means elections and policy making. And recently, Martin Gillens and I wrote a book basically about democracy in America and things that have gone wrong, how to fix them. And one of the things we discovered fairly quickly was the way elections are run currently in most parts of the United States have some serious problems. In particular, there's no guarantee of electing a candidate who is actually preferred by more voters than any other candidate. In other words, the majority doesn't always rule. And the reason it doesn't always rule is that plurality voting or first past the post voting can pick someone who is not particularly popular, as happened in the state of Maine with a very unpopular governor just recently. But even if you have a runoff between the top 2, which is expensive, you have to have 2 elections, there's no guarantee that the right result will come out of that because you may have eliminated a candidate who is more popular than the winner. However, it turns out this is very easy to solve, this problem. And ranked choice voting is a simple and effective way of doing it. Basically, if you let everybody rank candidates instead of just picking one, you get a lot more information about what people want. And you can use that information so that if nobody has a majority initially, you can make sure that the winner is the one who's preferred by more people than the loser. That's the chief advantage, but I think it's also worth mentioning that ranked choice voting encourages honest voting.
15 seconds.
It helps give a voice to minority groups and minority opinions, because it gets away from this tendency to worry about whether your candidate has a chance of winning, and to think you'd waste your vote if you voted for a minor candidate of some sort. With ranked choice voting, you can rank that candidate first and then be sure your vote will count, even if that candidate is eliminated. So the main point here, though, I think has already been made, and that is the proposal tonight is not to adopt this. It's to have a discussion about it for the next 3 months and have a referendum.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Betty Esther, who will be followed by Jay Young and then Joanne Avery.
Good evening. I want to point out the SP1, the resolution that you are debating and discussing of what you're going to do and how you're going to be electing and appointing the city manager, which is in violation of our city code. Back in October the 7th of 2019, this discussion was held then, and it was decided that you had to follow the city code. The city code does not says how you're supposed to vote for hiring a city manager, but it does state that there has to be 7 votes to fire a city manager. So the code is the law and what you should be following and not your rule. A resolution is not a law, and therefore you should be following the city code and not spending so much time on debating this issue. Just follow the code, and also maybe we can come up with having a city manager if you also follow it in involving the resident. The other thing I want to talk about is the affordable housing, the property over on Jackson and Evanston. The residents that live west of that property, that would be most of whom would be probably seeking to live in those units, would like to be part of the discussion. We haven't had a meeting. There was a city council. The alderman had a meeting with the people west of that, east of that building, and did not include the people west. That was not proper, and it was basically mostly homeowners, and you are dictating what renters should be, and that's just not appropriate.
Time.
So thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jay Young, who will be followed by Joanne Avery and then Evie Russell.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, honorable members of this council. Thank you for the opportunity to submit a public comment in support of Resolution 39R22. My name is Jay Young. I'm the Executive Director of Common Cause Illinois. Common Cause is a national, nonpartisan watchdog organization with 1.2 million members and supporters, including several thousand in the city of Evanston. Now, over the years, we've championed ranked choice voting systems in communities across the country, including the campaign in New York City that resulted in the election of New York City's second ever Black mayor. And while I'm happy to voice my support for any reform that encourages voters to engage with candidates in the system and improves turnout, I believe it's essential that voters understand how these new policies would work and how they can use it to ensure that their elected officials truly and accurately reflect their preferences. As such, I want to confine my limited testimony today to the importance of voter and candidate education that must occur in the event that this body elects to adopt this resolution. In New York, our coalition spearheaded a year-long education campaign that resulted in over 600 ranked choice voting online and in-person trainings. We partnered with over 750 organizations, trained nearly 250 candidates, and campaigned citywide. By election day, we and our partners had reached over 1.5 million New Yorkers. Educational materials were printed in 13 languages, large print included, and distributed through partners like food banks and the public library. Ultimately, over 1 million pieces of informational literature were distributed to voters that would be using a new system for the first time. We knocked over 50,000 doors and texted Korean and Chinese speakers, about 22,000 of them during early voting. Just actually today, the Center for Urban Research at the City University of New York released a report that was commissioned by my counterparts at Common Cause New York and Unite America Institute. And that too speaks in part to the key role that candidates themselves are going to play in this effort. My counterparts actually saw the importance of the education that the candidates in their campaigns actually had, where, for example, Black voters use ranked choice voting in the mayoral race, much less because the leading Black candidate there told people just to vote for him. However, Black voters also used ranking in city council races in larger numbers than other demographic groups because candidates asked them to rank. Look, I know Evanston isn't New York, and I know the educational needs I've referenced here need to be substantially scaled down to reflect the needs of the city.
Thank you very
I also
much.
don't want to draw too many lessons from a primary in 2021 where COVID played a much greater role than ranked choice voting ever did. Just want to make sure you guys properly are valuing the importance of voter and candidate education. Certainly we do at Common Cause, and we're committed to doing all that we can to get the word out regarding these potential changes because we know the promise of ranked choice voting is great.
Thank you very much.
Candidates, their elections with broadest possible support. They're incentivized to work together and without fear of splitting.
The next speaker will be Joanne Avery, who will be followed by Evie Russell. Ms. Avery, I think you're muted right now.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Not at all. Go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to make a public comment. I want to say congratulations to Peter. Peter, you know how I feel. I'm going to miss you. Seeing you every week. Okay, first of all, I want to talk about, today I did something different. I asked the kids, why. First of all, my name is Joanne Avery. I've worked at Family Focus for 40 years. Out of the 46 years that Family Focus has been in existence. I work with the after school program. Today I talked to the kids about what do they want to see happen at Family Focus. Of course, you know from the last meeting, bathrooms, water fountains, all of that. I asked them what did they get out of being at Family Focus, and they talked about having a safe place to be, knowing how to use their voice, being an upstander. Ariel, who spoke to you all last time, said that she's a leader. She is a leader because of Family Focus. She says, quote, I am who I am and more because of Family Focus. Some of the things they want to see, of course, bathrooms was at the top of the list. Last week, 2 weeks in a row, the kids decided to clean up the grounds. And one of them said, well, maybe if we clean up, then they'll see that we really need our building to be uplifted. I mean, they picked up 3 large garbage bags of garbage outside the Family Focus area. And one of the girls, Tara, said, you know, we have to appreciate what we have, but we want more. They want more. They deserve more. Our community deserves more, a family focus. And I'm just here to say, I hope that your vote would be for us to get the money to make sure that the kids are in a viable place that they appreciate. So thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Evie Russell, who will be followed by Dorian Price.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I've been living for over 40 years in front of McCullough Park, and unlike those who choose to be misinformed by entities such as Evanston Now, or those who cry wolf about, for example, homeless people invading parks, when Devon's proposal specifically addresses that issue, I made sure to contact the source of the proposal, Devon, and had ample opportunity to talk with him repeatedly, even today, and learned a lot about the proposal. So it is not true that residents don't have the opportunity to talk about this issue. They just have to, do something about it. I like many of the aspects of the proposal, such as the ability to cross the park on foot or bike, at night, and the application of a quiet time that starts at 10 p.m. rather than the present 11 p.m. schedule, which allows all kinds of noise to be, occurring in the park till that time. My only concern that remains, though, is how to successfully enforce the night quiet time. I strongly suggest two possibilities. One is to raise the curfew age from the current 17 to at the very least 18, but ideally to 21, since it's that age group, the teenagers, who are the problem. And then the second, the use of cameras in the park, which would make it very easy to control, to see what's going on. I believe that the issue should be tabled to allow Devon to have a forum with the residents and the Park District. Also, I believe that the Park District meeting raised this issue should have included Devon, because without him, I do not think they fully understand the proposal and unfairly raise irrelevant issues that the proposal does not create
15 seconds.
or that the proposal actually addresses. Thank you.
Thank you. The final speaker will be Dorian Price.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's see, let me just find what I wrote to make it faster. Okay. So I want to commend all the speakers in terms of valuing the best in Evanston. I think that that's our strength, to appreciate the good, and not only appreciate the good, but keep the good here, and help everybody succeed because of mutual prosperity. And so with that, I'm commenting on the city manager. Please include presentations or links for public preview in packets concerning the guaranteed income presentation, which was awesome. And I hope Cicely gets more recognition, and as well as Indira, for initiating a program that's much needed and greatly appreciated in the community, and will be a source for a national recognition as well. And also for the council for giving her voice, and at that time, including the mayor. In a new city manager, we need ethical and moral leadership across artificial barriers for sustainable prosperity. And I call them artificial because we still work with accounting that looks at silos. And when you hear Mike talk, he's speaking about those silos in conjunction with a bigger picture. And the bigger picture is what is problematic. The third thing is a vote tonight, and prioritize social, economic, environmental, community, and resident well-being must be a priority. Then the third thing is vote tonight for a new city manager must include the never agains. And in the never agains, I give an example of what can happen and not be intentional, and maybe can be rectified someday in terms of how we do things,
15
or
seconds.
prevented from ever happening again. So it's a never again thing that's supposed to be as positive as I can be for our city to move forward, is a positive. So thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you. That concludes public comment this evening, which brings us to special orders of business. Would someone care to make a motion on item SP2? Sorry, that's not the first number. Would someone care to make a motion on item SP1?
Mr. Mayor, I move item SP1, Resolution 54-R-22, amending City Council Rules 7.1, 7.2, and 25.5.
Second.
Councilmember Nusma moves item SP1. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns? Councilmember Sefferton? Aye. Councilmember Bell?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Harkaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Braithwaite? Aye. Councilmember Nguyen?
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, item SP1 passes. This brings us now, based on how numbers go, to SP2 correctly this time. Would someone care to make a motion on item SP2?
Mr. Mayor, I move item SP2, Resolution 55-R-22, authorizing the appointment of an interim city manager for the city of Evanston and execution of a contract.
Second.
Councilmember Newsom moves passage of item SP2. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Reed.
I don't want to do a big discussion. I just want to say thank you, Luke, for stepping up to the position. You've been with the city for a long time. I've had the opportunity, more so as a council member, but certainly even as clerk, to work with you. And you have always been a straight shooter, fair. You kind of stay above the fray and really just are here to do your job and do it the best you can. And so while I'm sad to see Manager Gandursky go, I'm certainly happy that you are the person filling in. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, would the acting clerk, who wears a lot of hats around here, please call the roll?
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns? Councilmember Sefferton? Councilmember Bell?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Harkaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Braithwaite? Councilmember Nguyen? Thank you. Mayor Biss?
Aye. So with 9 voting in favor and none voting against, item SP2 passes. And I know it's a long night, but I do want to echo Councilmember Reed and just saying a huge thank you to Luke for taking on this role. In a time the city really needs a beloved, stabilizing figure who knows the organization, and we couldn't be more fortunate to have you step in. So thank you so much, Luke. This now brings us to the consent agenda. So first of all, we're going to remove F1 from the consent agenda because the staff member who needed to present it is unfortunately ill today. And we're going to remove P1 and P2 as well from the consent agenda.
HC1.
HC1.
A8.
A8.
CM1. The minutes.
Well,
The minutes. Also H1, H2, H3.
H1, H2, H3. Got them.
A2, please.
So at this time, I have CM1, A2, A8, P1, P2, F1, H1, H2, H3, and HC1.
I didn't get them all.
Going once.
Could you just repeat it one more
Yep,
time?
you bet. CM1, A2, A8, P1, P2, F1, H1, H2, H3, and HC1.
Thank you.
Oh, and I'm sorry, H6.
Any further removals?
And my apologies, also the, I would imagine R1, or where is this?
I don't think so, actually.
The ranked choice voting is what I'm seeking to remove.
Oh, yeah, that is R1, correct.
I just don't,
Yeah.
well, R1.
Yep. All right, so last announcement, CM1, A2, A8, P1, P2, R1, F1, H1, H2, H3, H6, and HC1. Seeing no further additions, I would entertain a motion. Councilmember Nguyen moves approval of the entire consent agenda with the exception of the following items: CM1, A2, A8, P1, P2, R1, F1, H1, H2, H3, H6, and HC1. Councilmember Braithwaite seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll? Oh, Mr. Stoneback?
No, R1.
H6, I think, was the.
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sefferton?
Aye.
Councilmember Bell?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye again.
So by a vote of 9 or 10 to 0, depending on how many people you count Councilmember Nusma as being, the motion carries and the consent agenda is passed, except for that alphabet soup of omissions. There's been a request to move R1 to the top of the agenda because a number of people, both here and remotely, are prepared to give testimony. So out of respect for that request, let's start there. Would anyone care to make a motion on item R1?
Make a motion. And then I'll
Second.
second.
Sorry, where did the motion come from?
One.
All right, Councilmember Hedekaris moves item R1. Councilmember Nusma seconds. Is there any discussion? We'll begin with Councilmember Burns, followed by Reed.
Looking forward to hopefully it'll be a good discussion on this tonight. One thing I wanted to do just to kind of level set, because there was a comment that was made earlier that, and I think it is important to making a distinction at this time. As far as I understand, and please my colleagues correct me if I'm wrong, but there's two ways to get something on the referendum. It's through petition or through this body making the decision to put it on the ballot by voting on it. But that's not guaranteed. And so I heard a comment earlier that indicated like, oh, well, the council, shouldn't decide whether or not this ever gets to a vote. But you're asking us to, right? Because there's another way to do it. You could go out and circulate petitions, and through that process, and similar to what the Evanston Voter Initiative did, educate people about this, right? Go to festivals and to different meetings and do a robust community engagement process in an effort to get people to sign a petition, which then could put this on the ballot. But you're asking this body, right, to circumvent that in a sense, and for this body, right, to put it on the ballot. So I want to make that distinction, because we just had another group, EVI, that went out and did that, right, and tried to get something directly on the ballot. And I'm pretty sure they're saying now, man, I'd love for this body to just put it directly on the ballot for a referendum. So because of that, I think there is some weight on us to understand the importance of this and to think it through before deciding as a body to put on a referendum without that petition process happening. So I just wanted to add that, and I'm looking forward to a good discussion on this.
Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I guess before I really get into my comments, I want to I know that we have Professor McDaniel, who myself, Councilmember Kelly, and Burns have spoken to. So I maybe first want to start with introducing Professor McDaniel, if you are on the call here.
I am here.
Great. Professor McDaniel is from the University of San Francisco. Am I correct on that? I'm sorry.
Not quite. San Francisco State University.
San
but close.
Francisco State University, my apologies, and is one of the few nonpartisan academic, if maybe not the only, nonpartisan academic researchers who has done quite a bit of research on ranked choice voting. And so I wanted to make sure that for the benefit of the council and for the benefit of the public that we allow someone like Mr. McDaniel to give some testimony here.
Go ahead, Mr. McDaniel.
Great, thank you. One question I have is, am I allowed to share my screen to do a presentation, or would you prefer it to be just direct?
If it's an opinion question of the chair, I'm cool with it. If it's a technology question, you're talking to the wrong guy. Is that
No,
something?
if I can do it, that'd be great.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So, let me try to do this. It's what I do with my students, so I figure might as well do it here. So if everyone can see that, let me know. If you can't, just to give you a sense of the structure that I'm doing here today. So first off, I want to thank the mayor and the members of the city council for having me, especially Councilmember Reed. My first job was with the Los Angeles City Council, and I got that out of an internship, and so I try to get my students to watch city council meetings and what have you. So I really respect the work that everyone does here, and especially the seriousness of considering a change to your election processes. I had never heard of ranked choice voting before I moved to San Francisco, about 12 years ago. I was a political scientist. I was a newly minted PhD, and I had not heard of it. It had been adopted in San Francisco, and I began to study it. And I first tuned into some of the benefits that were, sort of promised. And the first one that caught my eye was the idea that the expanded choice that was offered by ranked choice balloting would bring in people who were disaffected in the process, people who might worry about their votes being wasted on a quote-unquote lesser of two evils kind of candidate, and then that would increase voter turnout. In fact, you may have noticed Professor Benjamin Page, who was in public comment, someone who I have great respect for, sort of mentioned the idea of increased participation. And I studied that, and that struck me as a little bit curious. And as I'll show you some of my research. But then as I've gone along, I've seen more benefits. There's lots, the idea of reducing negative campaigning. That's something I hear quite a lot. The idea that it would save money on election administration. The idea that ranked choice voting will reduce polarization and/or elect more moderate candidates. And then finally, the idea that it will prevent spoiler candidates and really elect a candidate who has a majority of the voters. And that is something that last benefit I do take more seriously. As I understand it, you're considering replacing a kind of potential runoff situation with ranked choice voting. And that's what I've studied.
I'm sorry, point of order, just it's a primary system, not runoff.
I'm sorry. So yes, a primary system there, which is more akin to what's happening in New York City. So I do study cities that have replaced their election system of a plurality election plus runoff election with the idea of ranked choice voting. So that's what I've studied in particular, and I can try to speak to some of the differences if you have any questions for me. I start with my perspective and my theory. Ranking, and there's cognitive studies to support this, is simply more complex than choosing. Now, that is not to say that it is infinitely complex or too complex. It's just more complex. And in my understanding and my theory and my research supports this, is that additional complexity does bring negative consequences. Not always, not inevitably, but I think the potential for negative consequences is often underplayed or underestimated, and the benefits, some of which I mentioned above, are exaggerated. And what I do, starting with my own research, my theory, and this theory goes back a lot with studies of voting in cities over hundreds of years that we've had that here in the United States, that the more complex you make the voting process, that acts as a barrier to participation. That it can happen in different ways. You can make it more difficult. You can change the ballots. You can take away information off of the ballots. But the idea of changing from choosing one candidate to ranking multiple candidates is a more complex process, and I expected that to be a barrier to participation, and we would see lower participation as a result. I've done several bits of research. This is a graph from a paper that I've presented before. I'm actually working on the final version of it now to present it at another conference and submit it for publication soon. But what this does in this research is I examined the 7 cities that at that time that I started the project used it to elect their mayors, to replace that sort of plurality plus runoff system, compared to about 200 cities that as a control group that were non-ranked choice voting cities, all different kinds of cities in terms of population size, small, medium, large. And what I found is that in the first 2 elections after the adoption of ranked choice voting, there is, on average, a decrease in voter turnout. That precise amount of decrease is, different depending upon the different model that I look at. But anywhere from 2 to 3 points to more like 5 points, which is a substantial reduction in turnout. And what this also shows is that it looks like in the 3rd election after the adoption of ranked choice voting that negative effect may diminish, if not go away entirely. One other piece of research then in the same paper, though, that's important, is that I find that negative effect varies by the cycle on which a city holds its elections. Some cities, like Berkeley, which has ranked choice voting, they elect their mayors on a presidential election cycle. Others use a midterm congressional election cycle. San Francisco uses what I call there the odd year 2 category, and I believe that is the same cycle that Evanston elects their city council members and mayor, at least their mayor on. I believe it's the same cycle. I would have to confirm that, but it is in that second odd year. That lower right-hand box where you see some of the most serious, I think, results where the effect diminishes somewhat, but not entirely. Similarly, for the presidential year elections, it seems to get worse over time. So there's some variation going on here, which I think is important to consider. I'll continue to try to get to you briefly so I don't take too much of your time. I also found that the idea of more complexity, I would expect more errors on the ballot. I published research several years ago with my co-author that supports that idea. This graph is not the definitive graph from that piece of work, but it does seem to show that the circles, both the hollow circles and the solid circles, are non-ranked choice voting elections, and all of the other symbols are ranked choice voting elections. And what we see is that in general, those are higher. The sort of triangles and squares are higher, not completely. The one circle that's very high on this graph is also a multi-candidate election. So it's sort of the most similar kind of election to a ranked choice voting election. And what we see is that more complex voting tasks, having to select more than one candidate or rank multiple candidates, results in higher ballot errors. And then there's a lot going on here. These are overvotes that were completely disqualified, right? So they were not corrected by or not caught by ballot checking equipment in the precinct. So these votes there was no cure available to these errors. So these were people who were very much disenfranchised. And so we do see quite a bit of an increase. As I will say later, I believe that Mr. Young from the Common Cause New York spoke to this. I believe voter education can help to mitigate these issues. But I will point out that in San Francisco, we had extensive voter education campaigns throughout this time period. And so it is not a panacea for some of these negative potential consequences. I speak here to some research that's not my own. It was requested that I try to speak specifically to the cost savings that are often claimed for ranked choice voting. I've heard this argument made several times that if not eliminating some elections, consolidating elections, it seemed obvious that it would reduce costs. The best study I've seen on this, presented at a conference by Christopher Road in 2018, I think there's been an update to this after this. I was present at this conference to see this research, found that there was no effect. And in particular, taking you through the 3 main findings, that cities that adopt ranked choice voting tend to spend more money on elections than other cities, and control cities in general. These are cities like San Francisco or Berkeley that have a lot of money to spend, and care, really do seem to spend more money on elections. Perhaps like New York which is not in this study, but might fit that kind of profile. So already these are the kinds of cities that adopt ranked choice voting are ones that spend a lot of money. However, what we see here in this graph is that in the election after and during the implementation process, the first election, you see costs going up. But that
Professor
increase is
McDaniel?
not significant. Yes.
This is your 1-minute warning.
Okay, I will go very quickly then. So costs go up, but not significantly in terms of statistical significance. They seem to go down after the adoption in more elections, but again, that's not significant. The main result is that there is no effect, right? So I'll just wrap up instead of going further. And what I will find is, and I do have other research to speak to if you wish, but that again, my research demonstrates that the costs, the negative potential costs, are real, and that the benefits that are promised, other research shows, tends not to be supporting the idea that there are benefits in terms of polarization, cost savings, or increased participation in elections. I'll stop there, and then if anybody has any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. I will have questions, but I'd also want to know, was there any testimony on the other side? I'd love to hear that first, too, if folks are okay.
So there are folks who intend to speak from their side. So you have the floor at this point, Councilman. Are you done for now?
I am done for now, yes.
Okay. Is there anyone else seeking to speak at this time? Seeing that no one is asking to speak, I was informed by the proponents, correct me if I'm wrong, that the idea is that first Eric Friedman from the New York City Campaign Finance Board would speak remotely, and then after that, Elisa Kaplan from Reform for Illinois. Is that correct? Okay. Mr. Friedman, are you in the Zoom?
I am. Good evening.
Go ahead.
So first, I want to thank you, members of the Evanston City Council, for the opportunity to testify about our experience with ranked choice voting in New York City. My name is Eric Friedman. I am the Assistant Executive Director for Public Affairs at the New York City Campaign Finance Board. So in November of 2019, New Yorkers voted on a ballot measure to use ranked choice voting in special and primary city elections for mayor, public advocate, controller, city council member, and borough president starting in 2021. The measure passed with overwhelming support, making New York City the largest city in the nation to adopt the system. So while the Board of Elections in New York City is responsible for administering elections, the CFB and our voter outreach initiative, NYC Votes, we were mandated by the city charter to create a robust voter education plan and campaign to prepare New Yorkers for the first citywide ranked choice voting election in June of 2021. CFB faced many challenges throughout our planning process. We couldn't hold in-person events or trainings because of the COVID pandemic, and had to develop new and innovative ways to reach the over 3.8 million registered voters eligible to vote in that year's primary. Furthermore, the CFB, like many agencies and organizations administering elections, had to navigate this rapidly changing landscape throughout that election year as legislators passed laws to ensure that voters could cast a ballot safely. Despite all of these challenges, our education campaign was a success, and that's really what I want to make sure to focus on tonight. Voters and candidates alike embraced ranked choice voting and reaped the benefits of the system. You've heard a little bit about some of those benefits already. For example, with ranked choice voting, voters have more say in who wins an election. If their first choices lose, voters still help choose who gets elected in the end. Second, the system incentivizes candidates to spend more of their time appealing to voters to garner broad support and less time attacking their competitors. And lastly, this is, again, matches the experience we had, as I'll talk about in a minute. Voters tend to elect more diverse candidates in ranked choice voting elections. With this system, in cities that have used it across the country, more women candidates and more women candidates of color are elected, making elected officials more representative of the communities they serve. So to talk a little bit about how our campaign went rolling ranked choice voting out in New York City. I mean, we have one of the most diverse cities in the nation. So ensuring that voters in every community could easily access accurate information within their localities and in their languages was a challenge. The success of our education campaign was contingent upon the clarity of our messaging and the level of trust the public has in the CFB. To that end, the CFB reached out to voters, to community organizations throughout New York City and other cities that have implemented ranked choice voting in their jurisdictions, as well as marketing and design experts to craft a comprehensive outreach strategy. The CFB went above and beyond to educate the public on the new system. One of our key partners in this effort was the Center for Civic Design, They're a nonprofit that seeks to apply design skills to improve the voting experience, make elections easier to run, and invite participation in elections. They've assisted in implementing ranked choice voting in jurisdictions around the country and shared best practices that our NYC Votes campaign could follow. They have a great framework. They call it a bite, snack, meal. A bite gives you just the key information that a voter needs to take action. A snack might tempt that voter to go look for more information, and the meal is the full details. Not every voter wants or needs the full meal, but the framework makes sure that all of that information gets out there so that voters can find the right level of information for them. So through our NYC Votes campaign, we created videos, explainers, and interactive practice ranked choice voting ballots in 5 languages for the website that we introduced to support the campaign. All of those included specific messaging on how to fill out the ballot to avoid some of those errors. You heard Professor McDaniel talk about it a little bit earlier. Pursuant to a law passed by our city council, we mailed postcards explaining ranked choice voting to every New York City household with a registered voter. In the first half of 2021, leading up to our primary, the CFP held over 175 trainings and events for local companies, community boards, and other community-based organizations to talk about ranked choice voting and help people learn how to vote in the new system with over 10,000 attendees. The CFP co-hosted some of these events with other city government agencies, including our Department of Education, our Department of Youth and Community Development, and with elected officials at the local and state level. We also provided guidance and messaging to all 374 candidates who appeared on our primary ballot. These efforts coincided with the CFB NYC Votes groundbreaking Get Out the Vote advertising campaign, which directed New Yorkers to critical election information and ranked choice voting explanation on the NYC Votes website. So in the end, roughly 1 million people voted in the June 2021 primary election. It was the highest turnout for a New York City local election in decades. Though ranked choice voting may not be the sole reason for the boost in turnout, it certainly suggests that the system does not cause a reduction in voter participation. In fact,
Mr. Friedman, I just want to quickly interject just for your group to do time management. You guys have about 4 minutes left between you, and I don't know how much of the time you want to take and how much Ms. Kaplan wanted to take.
Got it. I will kind of go briefly through what I've prepared to say, and hopefully Ms. Kaplan can kind of fill in. But bottom line is that the overwhelming majority of of voters told pollsters after the election they found their ballot simple to complete. 95% of voters said so. And really importantly, there was no variation between ethnic groups. So 77% of Black voters, 70% of Asian voters said they understood ranked choice voting extremely or very well. The similar figures were 80 and 81% for Hispanic and White voters. I think the bottom line is that, through some thoughtful research planning, coordination with our community partners, including elected officials, presenting the information clearly, we're able to help voters understand how to make their preferences heard, and really we're able to kind of minimize some of the confusion I think you've been hearing about before. Ranked choice voting improved our electoral process, benefited candidates, benefited voters. With that, I'll stop and hand the mic.
Can you hear me okay with this mask? Okay. I want to respond a bit to Professor McDaniel's comments. Hello? Is it amplified? Oh, now it is. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. I wanted to respond a bit to Professor McDaniel's comments. One of the great strengths of academia is that it encourages different viewpoints. You can find scholars with differences of opinion in every field. You can even find scholars who differ on the existence of climate change. It's important then to put the research we heard about today in context of other research that's been done on ranked choice voting, particularly on voter turnout and voter confusion. First, on turnout. To our knowledge, Professor McDaniel is the only scholar who has found that ranked choice voting has decreased turnout. Multiple other studies, and not just bipartisan academics, have found that it either does not decrease turnout or that it increases turnout. Can everybody hear me without it?
Folks on the call, it's going to happen whether you have the mic on or not, apparently.
So Anderson, you're saying there's a cell phone in the room that's causing the problem? Or in the world? Okay.
Hello?
All right. Thank you. Thanks.
All right, we'll do our best. So, to our knowledge, Professor McDaniel is the only scholar who has found that ranked choice voting has decreased turnout. Multiple other studies have found that it either does not decrease turnout or that it increases turnout. These include studies by Professors David Kimball and Joseph Anthony, Courtney Julich and Joseph Cole, Eamon McGinn, and others. In their 2021 peer-reviewed study, for example, Professors Julich and Cole found that ranked choice voting significantly boosted youth turnout while causing no turnout decrease among other voters. Eamon McGinn's paper found that ranked choice voting caused almost a 10-point increase in voter turnout in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, with the biggest increases in poorer districts. In addition, there is clear evidence that combining a primary and general election into one election, as Evanston would do, has big turnout benefits that would completely overwhelm any small decreases Professor McDaniel claims might occur. Ranked choice voting would eliminate our very low turnout primaries, prevent a tiny slice of the electorate from narrowing the choices down for everyone else, and enable many more people to participate in the full electoral process. Next, voter confusion. Contrary to Professor McDaniel's suggestions, there is ample academic evidence that most voters understand ranked choice voting just fine, and that this is true across racial and ethnic groups. As Professor Lee Drutman put it in a recent review of the evidence, quote, "Though critics and skeptics have raised concerns about the ways in which RCV could confuse and potentially demobilize certain voters, those concerns appear unfounded. There is, instead, evidence that voters like ranked choice voting a lot, that they use their rankings, and, importantly, that they do not make more errors that could get their votes thrown out than they do with conventional voting. In fact, ranked choice voting may reduce voting errors and help close race and gender gaps. A peer-reviewed 2021 study by Professor Jason Malloy and Matthew Ward found that fewer voters make serious errors, the kind that get their votes thrown out, with ranked choice voting, and that, quote, ranked choice ballots were associated with smaller discrepancies in error proneness according to race and gender, while the status quo ballot was associated with larger discrepancies. The authors summed up their findings this way: more expression, less error. Ranked choice ballots outperform the status quo. Again, high voter satisfaction and understanding of ranked choice voting are found across ethnic and racial groups. In several New York City races, for example, Black voters used their ranking ability more often than white voters did. This gave these voters more of a voice in the final outcome. The upshot is that research shows that ranked choice voting dramatically increases participation in the full electoral process, could reduce mistakes that get votes thrown out, and may help close voting error gaps between groups. This is simply a better, more democratic way of running elections. We should give Evanstonians a chance to vote on it. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So now we've heard the witness testimony from both both groups. And I want to see if there's further discussion from the council. No one, Councilmember Nusma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make it clear that what we're voting on tonight is not ranked choice voting, but whether or not we should put a referendum on the ballot in November. And so we have plenty of time to have the discussion about, is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? And certainly community education is going to be important before the referendum. And in my opinion, I think it's a good idea. If it passes, a lot of community education after the referendum, before the next election. But let's focus on what we're voting on tonight, which is just the referendum, not necessarily the merits of ranked choice voting either way.
At this time, no one else is asking to speak for the first time, so we'll go back to those who are asking for a second crack, beginning with Councilmember Reed with 4 minutes and 30 seconds left.
Thank you. I want to be clear. We're not just voting on whether or not to put this on the ballot, because if that's the case, then any referendum that comes before us, that should be the same attitude, that we're just going to place it on the ballot because we're going to let the voters decide. And if that's the attitude, then that's the attitude. I also want to say I really appreciated that Professor McDaniel cited actual studies and told us we can go verify those studies. I didn't really hear studies cited, just heard stuff said. But to the gentleman from New York, if he's still on the line, I have a few questions. Yes. I'm sorry, can you say your name?
All right, my name is Eric Friedman.
Yes, Mr. Friedman. Thank you. So I'm looking at the election results from New York where, in the Democratic primary, this was implemented for the first time. Just the Democratic primary, right? They didn't eliminate their primary in New York. They still have a primary, but they use ranked choice for the primary. Was there any race in New York where you have 49 council members, a mayor, and a whole bunch of a number of executive seats that were elected? Was there a single race where the first round winner did not end up becoming the winner?
There was at least one.
There's one out of about.
I think two.
There are two races
at the council level where a candidate who didn't come in first in that first round ranking ended up being the ultimate winner. Yeah.
So and there are two races out of over 50 races where.
Not every council district had a primary. There were primaries for each of the. Don't have the number off the top of my head, but at least it's between 30 and 40 races for city council at the primary, 5 borough presidencies, and the 3 citywide offices: controller, public advocate.
Yeah, and so I'm looking at the, and this is not just in this case. So this is, and maybe you can talk about this, but I'm looking, for example, at the 7th district or the 9th district, and it's so on and so forth, where, for example, the person who came in first place received, the person who came in second place, there were more inactive ballots than voters for the second place candidate. There were 6,533 inactive ballots by the 13th round, and the second place candidate got 6,000 votes. The first candidate, the top place candidate, got 10,000 votes. So it actually seems that that there are many cases where there are so many inactive ballots by the time you get to the third round, the fourth round, the fifth round, the 13th round, that in fact the majority of voters actually aren't. A true majority of voters aren't actually casting a ballot, making a decision in this case. Is that?
So I'm sorry, you're talking about the kind of phenomenon of exhausted ballots. Is that
correct?
Yes. So, look, exhausted ballots is not the same as not having a vote. You're talking about, in the end, you're talking about voters who have expressed a preference. It means if you have an exhausted ballot, it means that at the end of the count, you do not have one of the top 2 candidates on your ballot. So the same ultimate phenomenon is true in kind of a single choice plurality election, right? Not everybody has the winner on their ballot. And so we've never said in those cases that those voters who didn't cast the ballot for the winner, or for the candidate who finished second, single choice plurality, everybody's casting a vote. So, I think, it's not exactly the right frame to say that those voters whose ballots were quote unquote exhausted, were disenfranchised in some way.
I'm not-
Because in a lot of cases, they've listed candidates on their ballot, and they just, the candidates they chose in the end weren't one of the winners.
Right, but it does show that necessarily the candidate who came in first place isn't the candidate who is approved by the most voters, who the most folks. I mean, when you have many cases where there are just as many inactive ballots as votes for the second place, and in one there was almost as many exhausted ballots as the winning candidate in some races, and so. I wonder about this. And then the idea also that this means in America, we have a principle of one person, one vote. In this system, we do not have one person, one vote. In approval voting or other systems, there are alternatives that we could look at here. It truly would be one person, or maybe not even. But there is a scenario. Hear me out. Very realistic scenario where you have 3 candidates or 4 candidates. And the top 2 candidates, right, candidate A, B, C. Candidate A receives 45% of the vote, candidate B receives 40% of the vote, and then candidate C receives the remainder. And the only voters who are going to have an opportunity to vote twice are the candidate C who's eliminated. And in fact, and this is, I hope folks are following me, but let's say candidate B, most of candidate B's voters who came in second place out of a 3-way race, voted for candidate A as number 2, as their second choice. But because most of candidate C's voters voted for candidate B as number 2, candidate B could win when in fact candidate A was the candidate who had the most approval of the most voters. So there is a very realistic scenario where we're not electing the person who has the most support. We're electing the person who has the most support amongst the least popular candidates, not amongst the voters in our city, and especially when we have, in many cases, exhausted ballots. Mr. Melton, you're part of the group, so if you have something that you think I'm wrong, please, I would invite you to.
Councilmember, your time's up. Can you bring your remarks to a close?
Yes, I will bring my remarks to a close. In closing, this has not been shown, that the proponents of this have not shown how much or if this is going to save the city of Evanston and our taxpayers any money. There is clear, just looking at New York, even New York, where the second black mayor was elected, he would have won under the previous system because he came in first place, just like the others. And so this didn't make a material difference there. And as they said, it didn't make a material difference in, out of the 50 some odd races, only 2 of them had any shift. And so I really ask, what problem are we trying to solve? And then this is on my last thing, I will close here. Thank you. Is, on top of my concerns about how this system, ranked choice voting is not what it's quite cracked up to be. I'll say it's not my least favorite, right? I'd rank it maybe 3rd or 4th. Right? I don't know what that means, but it's maybe my 3rd or 4th. I'd put some other systems above it. And just the idea that candidates, that voters are going to even truly consider a candidate, that alternative candidates when their first choice is still in the rank. I think what we have now, the primary system, is a really solid system. It has led to extremely diverse councils. It has led to the election of an African-American mayor. And then lastly, there are a whole host of legal issues with this that I think are problematic here in Illinois. And so I'll leave it with that since there isn't enough time. And I would really recommend that we refer this back to have more discussion about legal issues, especially given that folks are so concerned that we haven't had a discussion about parks. We haven't had a discussion about this. This has been very quickly rushed through, haven't gone to ward meetings. There's been very little discussion. This is an extremely important decision. Thank you.
The next speaker is Councilmember Braithwaite. Councilmember Braithwaite moves the question. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Councilmember Wynn seconds. Will the clerk please call the roll on the motion to call the question?
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
I wanted to speak. I'm not voting on this. That's inappropriate.
Councilmember Sufferton?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
We are talking about changing our voting system, and folks want to rush this through. This is a horrible, horrible process for something as big as this. We should, voters, as you're going to the ballot in November, remember this moment and really wonder why this is going on. I vote no.
Councilmember Harakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
I also wanted to speak a little more. I think this is an important meeting this evening to become educated, so I'm going to vote no. I was hoping to hear a little bit more and have a little more discussion on this. I also think we should be considering the thousands of people who went out and turned in ballots and signed ballots for petitions for EVI, thousands and thousands. And I know Councilmember Harakari's one person brought this forward. I think it's very interesting. I want to hear more, but so I'm going to vote no. I think we should use this evening for further discussion.
A little point of privilege. Media, if you could please capture that because you can't tell what's going on. I have my light on to speak, which is why I'm not going to vote at all. This is something that's really important, and we should allow all our colleagues to speak on important issues such as this. I've never called a question, and I never will, to stop discussion. I think that is profoundly disrespectful, and I will not vote at all on anything tonight.
Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn?
With 6 voting in favor, 2 voting against, and 1 abstaining, the motion to call the question carries. Which brings us to the vote on the underlying item, Resolution 39-R-22. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns? Councilmember Suffredin?
Aye.
Councilmember Bell?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed? Councilmember Harakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Aye. Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn?
With 7 voting in favor, none voting against, and 2 abstentions, the motion carries and item R1 is passed. This brings us to item CM1. Would someone like to make a motion on item CM1? Councilmember Revelle. Sorry. Councilmember Braithwaite moves passage of item CM1. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Revelle seconds. And Councilmember Revelle?
I would like to make a correction to the minutes. It's on page 31 of the packet, the revised packet. It's item H2, which dealt with the city code on noises prohibited. And my motion was to table the item until August 8th, whereas the minutes say it's tabled till the July 20-something.
It says 25th.
Councilmember Revelle moves to amend the minutes of the June 27th council meeting to indicate that the noise ordinance was tabled to the August 8th meeting and not the July 25th meeting. Is there a second? Second. Councilmember Wynn seconds. Is there any discussion?
And I just like to say that I did listen to the recording, and I'm very clear that it was for the August meeting.
Seeing no further discussion, would the clerk please call the roll on Councilmember Revelle's amendment to the minutes?
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin?
Aye.
Councilmember Bell?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Harakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Aye. Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn?
With 9 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries and the minutes are duly amended. Is there any discussion on the now amended minutes? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll on CM1 as amended?
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin?
Aye.
Councilmember Bell?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Harakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn?
With 9 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries and the amended minutes are adopted. I do want to acknowledge an error that I made. I just allowed an amendment to slip through without being reduced to writing, breaking my rule for the first time, I believe, as mayor. Let the impeachment proceedings begin. But I will ask Councilmember Revelle if you could just sometime either during the meeting or tonight after the meeting, just send that in writing to the council and our staff leadership just to make sure that everything's correct, please. And sorry for everyone for my slip up in that respect. This brings us to item A2. I believe Councilmember Burns is chairing APW. Is that correct, Councilmember?
Councilmember Newsma.
Sorry,
Mr. Mayor, I will move item A2, approval of the BMO Harris Amazon credit card activity in the amount of $11,739.89.
Councilmember Newsom moves passage of item A2. Councilmember Wynn seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Newsma.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Sufferton.
I abstain.
Councilmember Revelle.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn.
With 8 voting in favor, none voting against, and 1 abstention, the motion carries and item A2 is passed. Councilmember Newsom, would you care to make a motion on item A8?
Mr. Mayor, I move item A8, Resolution 50-R-22, authorizing the transfer of funds between the General Fund, Solid Waste Fund, and Capital Improvement Fund.
Councilmember Newsom moves passage of item A8. Councilmember Wynn seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Braithwaite.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And unfortunately, I wasn't here for AP&W, so my first question is to Councilmember Burns to know if you had consulted with staff or had any questions about this.
I do not know. I did talk with staff about this, and I'm good to go.
Okay. And so, Dave, I just have one suggestion, and I don't know if we've captured this in our last conversation, years ago about it, but I don't see any boundaries that are set up, and I think in a previous discussion when we were looking at the alleys, number one, there should be a clear boundary in terms of where the capital projects are going. And then in glancing through the ordinance, are we only restricting this to capital projects in terms of the funding?
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. Dave Stoneback, Interim Deputy City Manager. The boundaries are actually in the resolution in the third whereas.
Is it possible to, because this is for action, just to have for future whoever else would come behind me or Councilman Burns, because this is going to last for a few additional years, just what those boundaries look like, just a basic map?
There is a map, yes. But again, it is specifically mentioned as being Emerson Street to the north, Wesley Avenue to the east, Grove to the south, and Dodge to the west. And so it's easy enough to make a map like that. There is a map readily available. It's not attached as part of this resolution. But those boundaries are listed in the resolution. And then right now, the direction that staff has received is that the funds should be used for alley improvements. And between the alley that's proposed to be completed this year, and I think was already awarded, and then the alley that was proposed to be completed next year, that will spend out almost all the funds that have been collected to date.
Okay.
From there on, we will only get $100,000 annually, and that's a rough guess. The charge, the host fee went up as of January 1st from 75 cents a ton to 80 cents a ton. That passes through the transfer station. So, but that, based on the amount of tons, we're only talking maybe $6,000, $7,000 more a year. So it's not, we'll go from 100,000 to maybe $105,000. So it's not a big windfall each year with that increase. It's every 4 years the increase.
Got it. And then my last question, because I don't have last time that we talked about this information from me, were you able to take care of all of the street lights improvements that were outlined from previous council, or is those
we did not.
Shelf?
The city council elected that we should start with the alleys. And so we did the alleys, and then in 21, we were unable to, we didn't have enough funds, or we were waiting for the ComEd easement. That's what it was. So we didn't do an alley in 21, and instead we did sidewalk repairs and we planted some trees. But no street lights have been addressed at all, and that would be something that if the direction of the council, if that's what they want to use. I mean, right now, staff's direction is that we do this alley and the one scheduled for 23. There is no further directive from council on how the funds should be spent, other than they should be spent within that area.
I mean, I think the only thing that you might want to have a consideration is that a lot of this is for capital improvement, big fan of trees, but if you look along the boundaries of the waste transfer station, you have a lot of dark streets, particularly on your side. I'm thinking about Lyons, I'm thinking about Darrow from Church to Emerson, and the $5,000 that trees are extremely important, may be better spent for lighting in those areas. And that's something that we had identified directly after the alleys, which of course provides, increased property value for those homeowners, particularly those that were waiting for the 50/50. So just something to think about. I wish I was at AP&W, but I'm sorry I missed it before this moves forward. So.
Councilmember Reed.
No.
Seeing no further discussion, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ooh, I could have made an amendment. Do you want to make an amendment for that, or you want to let it go as it is?
I'm sorry, what you're saying to?
So the last line is $5,000 for trees. I mean, you may be able to get additional trees from other sources. You may want to consider using that $5,000 to add additional lighting in the Lyons corridor between Dodge and Darrow. I would just make an amendment to say tree purchase planning and include lighting, and then you have the flexibility of moving that around. Yep. So
Yeah, if you want to
members
make
of
that
council-
amendment, yeah.
So on the page 3 of 5 for the memo, I would like to add the tree purchase for planting and lighting, which would give flexibility within that line item, and then you can move the dollars around just to address lighting concerns in that area.
But that's what we've
If
already
I could make a
spent.
clarification for that, that's project that was already completed. That
Okay.
was the fund already spent.
Okay.
So it's
then-
not future expenses, that's an expense that already occurred, so that would
Okay.
not be a place to add that.
Okay. So if we wanted to, unless I was trying to speed read through this, I would suggest hold it just to make sure that you're clear on there's some lighting needs that need to be done. And if we can bring it back at your next
So
meeting.
it's my understanding that we're not necessarily making a decision on how to use the funds tonight beyond what was already authorized by council, which was to improve the alleys in the zone that you specified a moment ago, which we have 2 alleys remaining. Once we complete those alleys with the waste transfer settlement funds, then we'll continue to collect the $100,000 on an annual basis. But you will be looking to council at that point to decide how to use the remaining funds, correct?
That is absolutely correct. I would confer with the council members from the 2nd and 5th Ward, understand what their priorities are, craft a memo, bring it back to the city council, say this is, let the city council agree that this is how they would prefer to spend the funds.
Yeah, so we'll still have an opportunity
Okay.
to set those priorities.
Councilman, did you still want to make a hold, or?
No.
All right. So I think everyone's waving me off. So thank you, everyone, for the discussion and the clarification. I think now folks are comfortable moving forward. Would the clerk please call the roll on item A8?
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin? Aye. Councilmember Bell?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Aye. Councilmember Braithwaite?
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn?
With 9 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries and item A8 is passed. This brings us to items P1 and P2 that I believe were pulled off because Councilmember Nusma would like to suspend the rules and do introduction and action on each of these tonight. Is that correct, Councilmember?
That's correct. Shall I make that motion right now? I move suspending the rules for items P1 and P2 so that they may be introduced and acted upon this evening.
Councilmember Nusman moves suspension of the rules for items P1 and P2 so that these ordinances can be introduced and acted upon tonight. Councilmember Wynn seconds. Is there any discussion on the motion to suspend the rules? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll on the motion to suspend the rules?
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin. Councilmember Rebel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn.
The motion, with 9 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries and the rules are suspended. Councilmember Newsom, do you want to make a motion on these 2 items simultaneously?
Yes, I'll move these 2 items simultaneously. Ordinance 71-0-22, which amends Section 3-14-5 of the Evanston City Code, and Ordinance 62-0-22, granting a special use permit for 1026 Davis Street for a private educational institution in the D2 Downtown Retail Core District.
Second.
Councilmember Newsom moves introduction and action, which is to say final passage of items P1 and P2. Councilmember Wynn seconds. Is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Newsom.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Is it clear what option we're going with, Councilmember Newsom? I know for one of these, there were 2 options, and I don't know if everybody.
That's a good point, sir. We did clarify the second option in item P1. Should have made that clear before.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Burns. Did you?
Yes.
Councilmember Suffredin. Councilmember Rebel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn.
Aye.
With 9 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries and items P1 and P2 are both passed. The next item on our agenda that was pulled is F1, which we are skipping tonight, again, because of personnel, because of an illness. And this brings us now to item H1. Councilmember Reed, would you care to make a motion?
Yes. I move to refer item H1 to back to the Human Services Committee, and I've spoken with Audrey already to have it also appear at the Parks and Rec Board to allow time for further discussion, so there's clarity on this matter.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Reed moves to refer item H1 to back to the Human Services Committee. Councilmember Burns seconds. Is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Newsom.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin. Councilmember Rebel.
No.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
No.
Councilmember Wynn.
With 6 voting in favor and 3 voting against, the motion carries, and Ordinance 59-0-22 is referred back to the Human Services Committee. This brings us to item H2. Councilmember Reed, would you like to make a motion on item H2?
Yes, I move item H2, Ordinance 66-022, amending portions of Title IX, Chapter 5, Section 10, General Offenses of the City Code.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Reed moves item H2. Councilmember Burns seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Ravel.
Well, I think it's just that several of these are a little hard to sort through, so I wanted us to just take them one at a time. So as I understand it, H2, perhaps I could ask Councilmember Reed to tell us what H2 does.
Yes. H2 amends Section 9510 of our code, alcoholic beverages and cannabis, consumption, possession on public property. And what this does is that this brings us in line with state code. This would amend Section B, which is consumption in vehicles. Folks would still not be able to consume alcohol or cannabis or anything in their vehicle, as is state law, and so this would not change this. The only thing that this would change is that, as I'm sure most of us have done, you've gone to maybe a party at a friend's house and afterward, or a gathering at a friend's house, and afterward, maybe you take a bottle of wine home and you cork that bottle of wine and you put it in your trunk and you drive home. Under state law, or the non-passenger portion of your vehicle, under state law, that would be legal. That's perfectly fine under state law to transport a previously opened container of alcohol or cannabis in the trunk or non-passenger portion of your vehicle. And in Evanston, that was not. So this brings us in alignment with the state code and allows folks to make that transport. It also, the only other amendment to this is it allows folks to possess, just to possess, not to consume, but to possess, have on your person or personal property containers of alcohol or cannabis products. Right now, if I were to go to the dispensary downtown, Zen Leaf, and were to or not me, I've never gone to Zen Leaf, but some resident goes to Zen Leaf, they purchase some cannabis there, they walk over to the Civic Center to pay a water bill, they would be violating the law just for walking into the building with a container of cannabis in their backpack. Or again, you go to the liquor store and you buy a bottle of wine and you're riding your bike home and you ride through a park on your way home, or you ride, or you decide to come here and pay a water bill. That would be illegal. And so this makes it legal for someone to, not consume, but just to have on their person the container.
And so looking at point number 1, it says, so the consumption of alcoholic beverages and cannabis products in public buildings, et cetera, would still be prohibited.
Yes.
And in terms of what part of the automobile you can have any of these things?
You still wouldn't be, yes, you would not be able to consume, and you could only have this in the non-passenger portion of the vehicle, as is what state code says.
Okay, thanks.
Next is Councilmember Braithwaite.
Yeah. Chief Eddington, do you have a moment? Just bring some clarity. I kind of get what Councilmember Reed is trying to do with this, but just downstream, how does this impact the work that you do? And
good evening, council members and members of the City Council. The downstream impact that we've outlined in our response memo is that, one, we're not over enforcing this now. You're not getting complaints about people being arrested for these violations. However, when you get into other quality of life issues like aggressive panhandling, where very few people want to sign complaints, where we begin to interview someone, talk to them, and then we find the open container or the open cannabis, that gives us an avenue of enforcement. And so once again, it's a tool that exists. We're not overusing it. In the memo, I suggested we retain the option. And once again, something that, should it come to the council members' attention that there would be a perception that the police are over enforcing this, you can still bring us back and explain it or change the ordinance at that time. But at this point in time, especially with the other issues that we're dealing with in the downtown area, I'm not certain I want to give this one up. I really would like you to at least consider that is a tool that's used in other areas. And also, I would revert back to my first comments. We're not over enforcing this. You're not getting complaints.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
As a quick follow-up question while the chief is up there, you mentioned open containers, which is not what I heard described in Councilmember Reed's setup. So I just want to make sure I understand what you're referring to. There's aggressive panhandling. Someone might be under the influence. They got an open bottle of something with them. I think you would still be able to address that without this particular part of the code. So I just want to understand, make sure I'm getting that right. We're talking about, as far as I understand, something in a sealed container, or at least something contained, not something that is open, but something that is contained, and someone is going about their way. They're not aggressively panhandling. They're not committing any other crime, except for if we continue to have this in our code. They're just traveling with a contained, legal substance.
And we don't arrest people for that. You're not getting those complaints. You're not hearing that from OPS at the Human Services Committee. We don't do that.
And it feels like the logical next step after hearing that is, so why don't we have it? Which would make this exercise worthwhile. It's like, let's just remove it so we certainly aren't using it in any situation. Again, I think aggressive panhandling, my issue with all of this is there's something else that already is on our code for the scenario you provided that's enforceable. So why not remove this, especially if we're not enforcing it and it takes it away from being maybe, unfairly, used in some scenario. That's what I'm not following. As long as we have something that is enforceable in any scenario you can provide, I think you have all the tools you need to keep the public safe.
Councilmember Nguyen, followed by Reed.
Well, I would like to take the chief's advice on this, and maybe not everyone has aggressive panhandling in their ward. I get almost daily complaints about aggressive panhandling at Main and Chicago, at the Jewel, at Trader Joe's. I regularly hear from my daughter and her friends about their being intimidated in front of Target, in front of the Sherman Starbucks, in front of the the CVS in our downtown. I cannot tell you how bad the aggressive panhandling is. I've been panhandled. I've had my car door knocked on many times. I have no idea whether those folks are consuming alcohol or not, but if it gave the police the opportunity to stop them and question them and ask them about that, and I would be fine with the police doing that, because I think when I talk to people, they are reluctant to sign a complaint, but they are intimidated and bothered. I talked to someone just the other night who pulled into the Jewel parking lot, saw 3 people hanging out front, and turned around and went home, didn't go in. And I'm hearing about that every day. So I want to keep tools in our police department's hands. I think that we have got to deal with our aggressive panhandling, and it's an epidemic in the 3rd Ward.
And real quick, Chief, on that note,
Let me.
just as a follow-up,
But no, hold on. So next in line is Councilmember Reed, if he wants to give up his time.
Well, not give up my time.
No, if he wants to give up his turn in line, which is a move he executes frequently.
Yeah.
I'm just
All right, so we'll go back then with 3.5 minutes left to Councilmember
What'll happen
Burns.
oftentimes is probably tough for media, and sometimes I'm concerned because it's hard for them to follow it, and then they don't write up stories the best always, and so it's a little easier if we can do it all in line. So Chief, I just want to make sure to understand is that what I'm hearing is that aggressive panhandling is allowed in Evanston, that we don't have any enforceable code currently if someone is aggressive panhandling, to address it. That's a genuine question. I just want to make sure I'm on the same page.
Councilmember, we have a code, but in that code enforcement, you need a complainant to say that person aggressively panhandled me. Now, you and I are out in the street. Now, is the panhandler going to approach you the way you're dressed, or me, the way I'm dressed right now? It's going to be you. And so if you're reluctant to sign, I can't enforce that. If you don't tell me that's what happened and you sign the ticket, we're done. And so now when the police attempt to address these issues, one of the fellow travelers with the aggressive panhandling is usually the panhandler may be a little under the weather from having successfully panhandled early and invested some of those earnings in alcoholic beverages. And so now I'm suggesting to the council, it's not an overly used portion of the code, but it's a tool we can apply in some specific situations. And again, we're not arresting people for unopened containers in their backpack. We don't do that. And so I think we're trying to fix something. We're trying to fix a pattern of conduct by the Evanston Police Department that doesn't exist.
Okay, good.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so now with Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, thank you. Or how much time do I have?
5 minutes.
Oh, okay, I haven't spoken yet. Okay, yes. So again, I'm trying to have a genuine conversation here. And the only thing I've heard people say why we should keep this on the books is for aggressive panhandling. Is that really what I'm hearing? I mean, that's what I'm hearing. And so to go back to the language in the code, this really is, we're all over the place here. We're nowhere near where this ordinance is dealing if we're talking about aggressive panhandling. Again, what this is changing is making it legal for someone to have a container of a wine bottle that has been corked, or cannabis that has previously been opened but put in the trunk or the non-passenger portion. So we're saying these homeless panhandlers are putting wine bottles in their trunks, and that's what we want to make sure that the police have a tool to stop homeless people from being able to drive around with wine in their trunk. So I just don't see how this helps enforcement at all in that portion. Can you tell me how
Yes,
this?
sir.
So no, okay.
No, you were the one who brought up backpack. Not me.
Well, I didn't say, well, right now I'm not talking about backpacks or anything else. I'm just talking about trunks of cars.
No. Council member, you're kind of fogging this up. It's not, you brought up backpacks on bicycles, not
Okay.
me.
Yeah, but
And
right
so
now,
what
right.
I'm saying
Hold on
is
one
that
second, Chief.
in that
Chief, one second.
backpack
One
example-
second, Chief. Because I'm not talking about backpacks right now. I'm talking about Section B of this ordinance, which is about having a container of alcohol in your car. So does that portion help someone being able to put wine in their trunk, a previously opened wine bottle in their trunk, as is the law at the state? How does this help the police department achieve any goals?
It does not.
Okay, so that portion we agree, maybe that portion should reflect what's here in the ordinance. So we shouldn't just vote this down, right? So let's think about that. And then the second part of this, right, about having these products, it does not say you can't have these. Section 2, if you look at C2, it says have on his or her person or about their personal property containers of alcoholic beverages, cannabis products in public buildings, parks, or beaches. What folks are talking about across the city is not panhandling at beaches, here at the Civic Center or parks. They're talking about panhandling on the sidewalk. So again, the changes here would not change. It's already legal for someone to have wine in their backpack on the sidewalk. So again, this has nothing. This doesn't help you enforce against unless you can tell me how it does. Does this help? That if I'm sorry,
sir. This is something that in the course of the search we can discover and charge for the open alcohol. And I'm saying once again, it is a rarely used tool, but as we attempt to address the quality of life issues that go along with panhandling, this is something that comes up somewhat frequently in dealing with it. If you listen to the complaints that have come from the downtown area, especially over by the alcove, the train underpass, the walkway under the train, it's all alcohol related. And so I'm saying I'm reluctant to give up any tools that help me address that, because most citizens are not going to sign the complaint for aggressive panhandling. They want the police to handle it. And this is one way we can handle it.
Often, and so I just want to level set again. How much time do I have left?
2 minutes and 19 seconds.
Okay. I want to be clear. Right now, it is legal for people to take wine out of to do takeout wine or take out beer or take out cocktails, right? And again, this idea that we are going to say that you can't walk out of a bar or you can't walk out of a place where it is illegal to have to put this in your vehicle. So I mean, at least that section should stand. I think again, Section 2 that says have on his or her person containers in a public park, a beach. Why do we need this on the code? If one, we're not enforcing it. We're not saying that panhandlers are at the beaches or here in the Civic Center or public building or parks. This is fairly ridiculous, and we have a law in the books about aggressive panhandling. I get that we're saying folks aren't maybe signing complaints, and then maybe that takes a bit of education in the community. But again, to say that we're going to criminalize people for having a legal substance, something that we say that we want people to buy because we want to make tax revenue off of alcohol and tax revenue for cannabis for our reparations program. So why would we make it illegal for someone to support our reparations program and then come here and then pay their water bill? And then that is an illegal act. That should not be an illegal act, and we need to amend this. So if folks are not okay with portions, then amend it to take portions out. But to shoot this down completely, especially when the chief has explained at least a portion of this, clearly does not interfere. And I'd say the whole thing, based on if we're just concerned about panhandling and using some alternative measure to arrest panhandlers because they have a bottle of wine in their backpack, I mean, that's ridiculous.
The next speaker with 4 minutes and 45 seconds left is Councilmember Braithwaite.
I won't need that long, and Chief, thank you very much for your explanation. I think we've had a really robust conversation with this. Councilmember Reed, with all due respect, I love the fact that you serve on Human Services because you get an opportunity to review the complaints just like everyone else. And from what I've heard and what I've seen over the years, I don't think this has been something that's been abused over the years. I think the best thing for us to do just to move forward is to vote no and move on to the next item. And my thought with some of these other things that are on the rest of the agenda is, if there isn't a problem, it's hard to find a solution. And I'm not sure with your approach with this, just who are you, trying to help? And I think and I've made this suggestion before, if these are things that you're hearing in public meetings, if these are emails and complaints you're receiving, then the best place to bring them up is Human Services, to where we can examine it with some degree of data. But other than that, it's hard to be supportive. So I just want to vote and move forward in our meeting. Thank you.
With 3 minutes left, the next speaker is Councilmember Burns.
I think we did discuss this in Human
Services.
Discuss it. That's where this came from. But I think I'm more interested moving forward to know, do we still have the alternatives to arrest committee in place?
Nope.
Okay, because I would like to, I don't know if I can move to recreate it now or to revive it, but we need a space where we can bring in our experts around the community that works in law enforcement and code enforcement and code correction to work on this. Because what is absolutely clear here, and this is not the first time this has happened, is people don't really understand what is being done now. And I can just tell by the responses that we're getting, people are not ready to really have a genuine conversation about this, probably because you wrote it off a long time ago. So we need to create a space where there are some credible members who can actually evaluate these in good faith, along with our chief and our law enforcement. But also, community members can evaluate this. And maybe at that point, once we get recommendations from that committee, they will be kind of weighed and looked at differently from this body, which is understandable. So, Mayor Bish, if you can just look into that, is what do we need to do procedurally to get that committee going? And then I would love for that to be the space where we can take a look at this. And I'm willing to serve on that committee as well. Thank you.
I'd be happy to talk about that and figure out the right way to do that. No one else is requesting to speak at this time, so would the clerk please, Councilmember Ravel.
Well, just one last point. So we've talked a lot about whether this particular change would be helpful or not helpful to enforcing against aggressive panhandlers, but it also does, one section is saying you can bring your 6-pack of beer to the park or the beach as long as you don't open it while I'm looking. So I guess I continue to be against voting for this one.
And the next speaker with 10 seconds left is Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, and I'm just going to close up here again. If folks are not liking a portion of this, I would recommend that folks move to amend. But the chief has clearly said that at least a portion of this is unnecessary code, and so we should adjust the code, at least a portion. The other portions I still support. Jokingly, I told Alderman Revelle that I'm going to sit outside of businesses in her ward and call the police on anybody who walks out with a bottle of wine, because this is ridiculous that we would arrest people for doing something that we all know that we have likely done at some point, carried a container of alcohol or cannabis somewhere. And the idea that, this would be a criminal offense, especially when we're talking about alternative methods to arrest and reducing criminality, this should be the lowest priority for us to enforce, and it shouldn't even be on the books.
Thank you. Since no one else is seeking to speak, would the clerk please call the roll? This is on item H2.
Councilmember Nusma?
No.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sefferdim? No. Councilmember Revelle?
No.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Harakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Braithwaite? Councilmember Wynn?
With 3 voting in favor and 6 voting against, the motion does not pass. This brings us to item H3. Councilmember Reed, would you care to make a motion?
I move item H3, Ordinance 67-022, amending portions of Title IX, Chapter 5, General Offenses.
Is there a second? Councilmember Reed moves passage of item H3. Councilmember Kelly seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Revelle.
Well, just could I ask Councilmember Reed to explain what this section does?
Yes, 1 second.
I would challenge one of our colleagues to explain it.
Yeah,
to see if anybody read it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It's like some of this is not even. We should just forward this alternatives to arrest and just have a much better discussion on stuff. But go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm being a little tongue in cheek here, but honestly, this is ridiculous.
Councilmember Reed, do you want to answer the question?
Yes. I'm sorry, you said HS3?
H3.
Or H3.
Ordinance 67-0-22.
Yep. Okay, so this would make the this would add cannabis products that if someone under 21 years of age were to purchase cannabis, it would make the purchase of cannabis products by someone under the age of 21 a ordinance violation, and so it would add cannabis products to the list with alcohol, as well as just remove the attempt to purchase portion. So if a young person were to attempt to purchase, that would not be a crime, but purchasing still would be, but the attempt would not be, as well as, again, this would be adding cannabis products to the list of things that are illegal. And as we voted the last time, this would create an alternative to arrest by allowing officers to give a local ticket violation as opposed to a state charge. Councilman, it was your time, Councilman Rubio.
Well, since you've encouraged us to amend things, I would move that we amend this proposal to unstrike or attempt to purchase.
Yes. Second.
I mean, so we would be adding the cannabis products to this section of the code along with alcoholic liquor, but we would continue to, I mean, do we want young people to go from store to store until they can find somebody who's going to sell them a product?
So just.
Okay, so
Councilmember Rell made a motion, which I'm not going to give you 2 free passes in one night, or hopefully one term.
Oh my gosh.
So if you're willing to reduce that into writing, I think that motion was then been seconded by Councilmember Nguyen. So that we'll stand at ease for a moment to allow the motion to be put in writing, at which point folks can debate the motion if they're so inclined.
as you're doing this, Councilmember Ravel,
Hold on one second. Are you, Councilmember Hill, are you nearly done, or do you want to allow others to speak while you're?
I'm speaking directly to what she's doing, so.
That's fine.
Okay.
Do you want to allow others to speak while you're doing this, Councilmember Ravel, or do you want to just power through?
Let's see if that's a good enough amendment.
All right, so she writes, Councilmember moves to unstrike or reinstate the phrase "or attempt to purchase," which, for those of you who are, bless you, those of you who are following, appears in 9-5-10.1 A on page 268 of the packet. So that is the motion made by Councilmember Ravel and seconded by Councilmember Nguyen. And on this motion, Councilmember Reed.
Oh, good Lord.
Yes. Again, we're looking for alternatives to arrest, so I would love to see this. To answer your question about folks going around from store to store trying to buy alcohol, it is to purchase alcohol or to purchase cannabis, it requires a state ID. Having a fake state ID that says that you're over an age that you're not is against the law already. And so, and if a business owner, it's illegal for a business owner to sell cannabis or alcohol to someone under, to someone under the age of 21. And so it's doubly illegal. And so we have a lot of protections in place. And to say that someone who makes an attempt should be arrested for that, I think is silly. But what I think we can do is, the amendment has been made and seconded. I would like to further amendment to make that a ticketable offense as opposed to merely that the attempt to purchase would be a ticketable offense of not more than, $50, $100. So I will put that in writing now, but I move that.
So we may have exceeded my knowledge of Robert's rules. My instinct is that motion will be in order should the current amendment pass, so that the relevant text be there to
And
be
I
amended.
ask for a friendly amendment then to Councilmember Ravel's.
No.
Okay, friendly amendment. And I will put that in writing.
So I think Councilmember Ravel has now withdrawn her amendment, and it's going to be superseded by amendment that does what she was going to do plus something else. Is that right?
What?
I think Councilmember Reed's going to add to my motion.
All right, well, I would recommend that we take a vote on your amendment so that your amendment is adopted, and then we're all in agreement that the item is. All right, fine. Let's ask the person who knows the rules.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. You had it right, Mayor. What was going to be offered through the friendly amendment was the First Amendment plus. So with a friendly amendment, let's see what Councilman Reed has to present, and then that would be the vote. You wouldn't have to do both.
So it would incorporate
Yes.
both. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So can you put that in writing then, Councilmember?
I'm putting it in writing now. Okay, yeah, just so the parents have to. Yeah, 50 is fine. Is ticketable a word? My spell correct keeps saying that it's not, and I've been writing this word often, and I want to make sure that
I think ticketable is fine.
Okay. And you have it, Mayor Biss. And this is for introduction, so the law department can clean this up however they see fit after, between now and the next one.
All right, so the new amendment made by Councilmember Reed, which is in folks' inbox, continues to unstrike the phrase "or attempt to purchase," and then further adds that the attempt to purchase by a minor may only be a ticketable offense punishable by a fine not to exceed $50. Is there a second to that motion?
It was a,
So Councilmember Reed moves what I just said, which is to say we will reinstate the phrase "or attempt to purchase," but make that attempt only ticketable and by a fine not exceeding $50. Councilmember Ravel seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Reed, continue, please.
Yeah, as we move forward with this, I just want to make sure, particularly for someone like Councilmember Nusma, do you have, or Juan, do you all have opposition to this as amended? Are you fine with this new language? Okay. Thank you. All right.
Would the clerk please then call the roll on the amendment that was just recently described?
Councilmember Nusma? Aye. Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin? Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Aye. Councilmember Braithwaite? Aye. Councilmember Wynn?
Aye.
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries, and Ordinance 67-0-22 has now been amended as was previously described. The next two speakers who've been very patient, I have to say, are Councilmembers Wynn and Nusma. Councilmember Wynn? Councilmember Nusma? Is there any further discussion on item H3 as recently amended? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll on item H3 as amended?
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Suffredin? Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Braithwaite? Councilmember Wynn?
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, item H3 as amended passes, and we'll see it back here perhaps with some modestly cleaned up syntax in 2 weeks. This brings us to item H6. Councilmember Reed, would you care to make a motion?
Yes, I move item H6, Ordinance 46-022, deleting Title 6, Chapter 5, Section 2, burglars' tools of the City Code.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Reed moves passage of item H6. Councilmember Burns seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I just, there's a lot of confusion in the community on this, and I want to make sure the community understands what's happening here. So we had an ordinance on the books that had been found unconstitutional in 1970. And just to confirm, that is also, Council Price, you have also looked at this?
That's correct, Council Member. The ordinances that existed on Evanston's books required proof of intent by the person, the defendant, in other words. And that shift in the burden of proof was what was found unconstitutional back in the 70s. Nobody had ever challenged it here in Evanston. So when, as a result of your examination of this section, legal department looked at it, they recognized that that shift needed to be corrected. So that's what this ordinance does, is it corrects that.
Yeah, and thank you very much. And so this aligns our code with one being constitutional and legal, and also it ensures, and there was an amendment made that would make it mirror state law, and it would give law enforcement an opportunity for alternative means of prosecution. I will say one question. My only concern with this, and I certainly support creating alternative avenues. I mean, my initial reason was just to eliminate a law that was unlawful. But being in possession of burglars' tools, Council Price, would the state's attorney's office still be able to charge folks if they were aware that folks had possession of burglars' tools?
They could, yes.
And so the state's attorney still could charge someone. So that's, one, with having this on the books, but two, still on the books, but two, with This is a fairly, in my opinion, a fairly serious offense to possess burglar's tools in the commission of a crime or of a burglary, or with the intent to burgle. And so because it's serious, can Attorney Price, could this turn up in a background check on someone's?
Well, if you were convicted as a felony, certainly. Here, though, if the police officer involved in making the decision how to charge this in the initial instance.
If I may just rephrase my question in interest of time. If someone were doing a background check and they FOIA'd and they did a thorough search and were to FOIA this city for tickets and arrest of folks, could they receive this in a FOIA? If someone was arrested and ticketed for
an ordinance violation?
Yes.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
There are exceptions, but I don't know how we'd apply them. It's all, I mean, I need more as they say in law school, I need more facts.
Yeah, yeah. And as a former FOIA officer for 4 years, my understanding is, yes, this is something that's totally FOIAble. And so also, counsel, in our administrative hearings, folks aren't provided counsel, correct? There's no right to an attorney?
They are not, because it's not a criminal consequence.
Yeah, but they are, potentially punishable by a fine, and so this could turn up on somebody's background in a thorough search, especially if you're applying for a job in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and this could also, you're not given an attorney, and this is a fairly serious, offense, and I think I support moving forward with this, but I do think it's important that particularly for something as serious as burglars' tools, it maybe should go to the state's attorney to give both the victim and the perpetrator the right to an attorney, the right to have a clear understanding of what their rights are, and have a fair trial. And so I'll stop there, but I do think, having those, particularly for something that would otherwise be a felony, having those options really does maybe even more justice. But and then last question, Counsel Price, because we confirmed this by email. Oftentimes, charges like this are already reduced down to a misdemeanor by the state's attorney. Is that potentially correct?
Potentially, that is the play, that prosecutors in our office, former prosecutors, have said that in the course of, when it comes to working with the charge of possessing burglars' tools, that it's typically wrapped up as proof of the intent with burglary itself or theft or other things, and the negotiated plea is typically at a misdemeanor level. But the arrest and all the rest, that's a much different and available record than the one where the city of Evanston has this alternative approach.
Thank you. That's it.
Seeing no one else seeking to speak, would the clerk please call the roll on item H6?
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sefferdom? Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Braithwaite? Councilmember Wynn?
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, item H6 passes. And this brings us to item HC1. I think, if I have this right, Councilmember Ravel would be the appropriate person to make the motion there.
Sure. I move approval of $1 million of ARPA funding for the One-Stop Shop Housing Retrofit Program.
Councilmember Ravel moves passage of item HC1. Councilmember Wynn seconds. Is there any discussion?
I need to
sorry.
recuse myself from this item because Evanston Development Cooperative is part of the program.
Got it. Thank you. Councilmember Nusma.
I will be recusing myself for the same reason. Sorry.
Councilmember Burns.
Just for the record, I am no longer a board member or a shareholder of Evanston Development Cooperative, and so I plan to vote tonight.
Seeing no further discussion, would the clerk please call what's going to be a kind of lonely roll?
Councilmember Nusma?
Abstain.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Sefferdom? Councilmember Ravel?
Abstain.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly, Councilmember Braithwaite, Councilmember Nguyen.
With 6 voting in favor and none voting against, and 2 articulated abstentions, item HC1 is declared, the motion carries, and item HC1 is declared passed. This concludes our handling of the consent agenda, bringing us to call of the wards. Councilmember Nusma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to everybody who's participated in office hours and attended ward meetings. We do anticipate ongoing public discussion through a variety of channels regarding Connections for the Homeless and their desire to purchase Margarita Inn. So stay tuned for some more information on that. Again, thank you to Councilmember Braithwaite for your years of public service. You remain a role model and an inspiration. Thank you to Kelly Gandursky. And please don't change your phone number.
Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, I just wanted to again reiterate for the record, again, that I indicated in the ranked choice discussion by flipping on my light that I wanted to continue to discuss what is a really important issue for the city. I plan to support and vote on moving this forward tonight, but decided to not vote yes or no because I wasn't given the opportunity to ask questions, especially to Professor McDaniel and even the gentleman who joined us from New York, who set aside some time just to answer questions that we had tonight. And again, I think it is incredibly unprofessional to cut discussion in that manner, especially when we have guests that have made themselves available so that we can inform themselves. It is not a guarantee that we will vote to forward something onto a referendum. And if that is the case, this group knows that we're going to have Evanston voter initiative in our email boxes probably tomorrow saying, look, if that's the new policy, let's get EVI on the next ballot. And I can almost assume that that will be rejected. And so it is not a given. And we encourage people to persuade us on why they feel we should refer things to the ballot. But it still deserves a discussion. It still deserves a fair review of the facts. And that's what we facilitated today by having Professor McDaniels here to attend, as well as having the fair vote and the other supporters of ranked choice voting. Elections are not great places for voter education unless this body is going to spend the money to ensure that all sides of an issue are considered and weighed. Elections are opportunities for people to tell voters how to feel and think about issues, because you have a set amount of time, and I guarantee the folks that we heard tonight in support of ranked choice voting aren't going to be at the polls telling people, we want you to weigh all your options carefully. They're going to be saying, support this thing because it's the best thing to do, right? And so, again, unless as a city we're willing to contribute funds to make sure that there's a fair and unbiased presentation of the facts during this period before the vote happens, then we cannot ensure that will take place during the election, during the consideration of this. And so again, I would never, as long as I'm here, I would never move to suspend the discussion around an issue, especially one as important as this. And I would hope that we would no longer do that. It's very unprofessional. And other than that, I thank folks I thought it was removed, but I think anybody that came out to speak in support of the Family Focus ARPA request. Appreciate the support of my colleagues here, and it's a really important project, and I'm happy we're moving forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Sefferden.
No report.
Councilmember Revelle.
No report.
Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, I just want to echo Councilmember Burns and the concern there. We have folks all the time say that we need more public discussion and we need more citizen input. This has come before this council in the rules, and then for introduction, and then not even for introduction and action, just for action. But it appeared twice, and this body has discussed something as monumental as changing our form of electing our representatives for a minute amount of time, and so disappointed here. Also, disappointed that folks didn't take a real consideration about the making something that many people do, drive with alcohol in their trunk, something that's legal at the state. We are creating a law that we are maintaining a law that criminalizes something that I guarantee everyone on this dais has done. And, you know, we maintained a law that, again, Uber delivery drivers who are delivering alcohol, it is illegal for them, in some cases, to deliver this alcohol. It's illegal for them to walk out of the store with this stuff. And so if this is what you want for your voters and for your residents, then so be it. And, you know, we'll see how this is enforced in the future.
Councilmember.
And then lastly, I have a ward meeting on the last Thursday of the month, as always, at 6 p.m. Excited for 8th Warders to, and folks across the city to come out to that and have a thorough discussion.
Councilmember Hadakatis.
Nothing to report.
Councilmember Kelly.
No report.
Councilmember Braithwaite.
Just again, I want to share my gratitude and heartfelt thanks to all the residents who came out personally as well as online for your kind words and comments, to Pastor Monty Dillard and the faith community, Evanston Own It. Thank you very much for your partnership over the years to keep our 2nd and 5th Ward safe through your prayers and financial support of the Mayor's Summer Youth Employment Program. And then more importantly, I just wanted to give a moment and say thank you very much to my family who came out to be a part of the last meeting. It has been with your support and love that I've been able to do this work, and especially my wife, Claudia, for all of your support and understanding over the years. Judge Lionel Jean-Baptiste, Alderman Holmes, Robin Simmons, I appreciate all of your kind words and support over the years. And then lastly, to our incredible staff, from our directors down to our managers. And Kelly, I wish you nothing but the best in your new endeavors. I shared that earlier, and I look forward to staying in touch with you. And to Mayor Biss and members of council, I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Nguyen.
Yes, my postponed office hours will be this Thursday at Brothers K from 7:30 till 10 a.m.
A point of information just for you, Councilmember Nguyen. I just looked at the city website. I happened to see that on there, and it didn't say Brothers K. It said something Roasters or something. It said something else, another coffee shop on the city's website on the calendar.
Thanks, I'll correct it. It's only ever been at
And I
Brothers
thought
K.
that because but just so you know.
And with that, Councilmember Newsom is recognized to make a motion.
Pursuant to 5 Illinois compiled statutes 120/2A, I move that the City Council convene into executive session to discuss agenda items which are permitted subjects to be considered in executive session as enumerated exceptions under the Open Meetings Act as set forth in 5 ILCS 120/2A, sections C1, personnel, C5, purchase or use of real property, C6, setting the price or sale or lease of property owned by the city, C11, litigation, and C21, discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed under this act.
Second.
Councilmember Newsom moves that the City Council resolve itself into an executive session. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Newsom.
Aye.
Councilmember Burns. Aye. Councilmember Sufferman. Councilmember Revelle.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed. Aye. Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Braithwaite. Aye. Councilmember Nguyen.
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion passes, and the City Council resolves itself into an executive session to begin immediately at 10:04 p.m. in the Council Member Library.